Welcome everyone to the Geometric View, Episode 10, Season 1. We get into helicon waves, plasma photonic crystal growth, and the trapping regime. Alright, how's it going, Michael? Good afternoon.
Yes, sir, going very well.
Good afternoon, Heather.
Hello.
Good afternoon, Tess.
Good afternoon.
All right, we're still going through other people. It's sending out some call, but typically I like to hop right into it. Looks like I got something on my screen.
Say, I'm a little. My sound's a little scratchy, so I'm gonna hang up and call back.
Okay.
How have you been, buddy?
You guys hear me good?
Yes, sir.
Cool. That's a weird thing that's in my camera. See it right in my eye? Maybe it's a warning for episode later, the plank in my eye.
There's something there.
Maybe, I don't know. It looks
I
like
don't
you're
know.
refracting some crazy reality there.
So check this out. To get things started here, I do my bubble sculpting.
Colors.
But yeah, bubble sculpting with stained glass.
That is beautiful.
Have you got into the cymatic part of that bit?
You get fancy.
Oh, dude, these are so beautiful, and the mannequin holds it. You know. Have you guys seen my mannequin yet?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Yeah, it's kind of weird being a mannequin owner. Yeah, I own a mannequin now.
That is a little creepy. It's okay.
Yeah, everyone's getting used to it. Freaking out all my lady friends coming over that when they see her sitting over there like, what the hell?
I don't know what would you do that would be weird to me? I don't know that I can come up with anything that you would do that I would think. I assume everything that you do is weird, and eventually I will understand it. So
I like to call it unique and eccentric.
Yeah,
you kind of have some leeway with me, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Thanks for the love, guys. This is a good beginning to the episode. We got some fire here. Lovely. I mean, this is us. We are the Geometric View, and it looks like we got a packed house today.
It's freaky up in here.
Michael joined. We got Brighton as well. I shouted out some names earlier. So now we're about 3 minutes in, and Brighton, if you want to be on cue for sounds in the background, there's going to be quite a few sounds that we're going to get into. Maybe not sharing your screen, but some of the sounds. I'll point out the links.
All right.
Like the Schumann resonance, or
you'll see. Oh, you'll see. We'll get into it. Today's episode. Do I even have a thing to go off of? Yeah. Today's episode, I'm going to be introducing the electrosonic origin of species. This is a lot of it is sculpted from my intuition, and a lot of it is actual. So we'll see how far we get into the episode, because it's basically the hypothesis of sonobiology, being that all creatures are built on a scaffolding of resonance that originates from birkeland currents. And the simplex of the geometry of the Dougherty network allows us to study both the qualitative and quantitative modalities of the currents. So
beautiful, very eloquent.
Thank you. Well, this episode, I wrote it down, a couple things here. I mean, I woke up at 3:00 and I was like, I haven't stopped working on this episode since. So
it makes me have an interesting thought. Like, all right, so every frequency has an animal or a mitochondria, right? So you think we're just like say an interference pattern based on the reoccurring wavelengths of those species?
Yep, Michael, you know what? I'm going to hop into the episode because that's exactly what it is. And that's what we're going to get into. So if I could, I'm going to steal the screen, which I just did, and I'm going to go into the comment bar here. I put in quite a few comments here in the comment bar. And yeah, Michael brings up a good point. That's exactly how it all starts, really, is
the Schumann resonance and the yeah.
Is these basically cavities, the Schumann resonance, Schumann cavity, interference patterns.
Interference patterns, thank you. Gosh.
So the first couple links that I shared have to do with, I was studying the chambered nautilus and the ammonites, and there's a folklore that call these ammonites. You know what ammonites are, guys? They're the basically the shells in stone.
The spiral animal.
Yeah, the spiral shell. So another name of these is snake stones, according to the medieval legend. There's a legend having to do with it, where there were snakes that kept coming out of the ground, and Saint Hilda prayed to God and asked the snakes to basically get their head chopped off and turn into stone. And that was the story of the legend of Saint Hilda turning these into stone. I thought that might be just a good segue. Here's the link for it. I'm not going to open it now because there's too much to get into.
Ammonites. That's another way. They also call them ammonite.
But don't we know now that those were actual creatures that have been fossilized? I mean, I'm not saying that it's outside of the realm of like immediate transmutation, fossilization,
right?
Like a crab type thing. But I am saying that we do know for a fact that those are genuinely animals.
They're fossils, yeah.
Right.
They're completely agree.
Creature.
Yes, they are fossilized. We don't believe that they were flash fossilized, like the myth or the legend says.
Why don't we believe that they were flash fossilized?
I mean, I don't right now. I mean, they might have been. That's not my point. None of this is really my point.
Okay,
my point is I just wanted to bring up the fact that it kind of transitions us into thinking about spiral shells and spiral shapes. I have a lot of different.
I mean, back in the day, wasn't the fruit have even a spiral, shapes, Jim? Like watermelons, for instance, I heard used to have a spiral type inside. Have you ever heard that?
I have no idea. I've never heard that. But today, all of our episodes are basically congruent, and you can watch them and see us grow and see what we're pointing at. The dog's nose is pointing at something, and we're going to get into exactly what the pine cone's nose is pointing at, and wavelets and what they are and how they recur and pull sound up or extricate sound up from the earth. Now, this was covered in the last episode quite extensively. We started to get into whistlers and hisslers and growlers, and these are the actual currents that are the sound of the earth, if you will. The earth's gut is making sounds. And these are images. This is an image right here. This is a good one to start with. So basically, we're getting a bunch of solar wind. The sun is shooting out this ionic wind, and it's captured in the Van Allen belts. And sound from the auroras can be heard. And when I heard the sound of the auroras, or the northern lights, I immediately hypothesized that it was the shape of a pine cone or a pine tree. and I intuited this because I am familiar with the shape of what it is. So I knew that it was a corkscrew like helical type of shape, which this right here is the shape of a whistler. This is a whistler, what we heard. Now I want to go back and play some sounds of whistlers, so everyone can get familiarized with it. But in order to do that, Brighton has to pull it up. So,
can I also just say something real quick?
Absolutely.
That the sound of the whistler waves isn't necessarily always audible. As a matter of fact, that it isn't generally audible. It's a radio frequency that's picked up via antenna. So that's kind of an important thing, because whistlers can be heard from miles and miles and miles away via radio frequency reception. So you don't have to be standing next to a lightning or next to an aurora to pick up this sound.
Wow, that's incredible. And do you know what type of equipment we might use to pick up this sound?
5 coils of 5 spins of a coil of a copper wire and a audio receiver is all you need.
Okay,
you could actually even turn your car on, turn your car radio on, turn your car on, your car radio on, put it on a channel that isn't receiving a signal, and you can hear the clicks of the whistlers, the clicks, the simultaneous to the lightning, they're called spherics. You can hear them being picked up on your radio in your car.
Now, Heather's known about these a lot longer than I have, and shame on me for not watching one of her videos and catching it. I caught it later and then asked Heather for this video. Now, Brighton, could you play in the background the sound of the hisslers and growlers? Just look up the sound of the Northern Lights again, like last time, please. And then just fast forward it to where we can hear it, so we can hear it in the background while we're kind of talking a little bit. Now, this is really important because this is the shape of them. This is the shape of particularly whistler waves. Now, there's a whole bunch of different kind of waves that are going on here in wave interference that's happening. Here's the Earth, here's the magnetosphere. Okay, here's the Van Allen belts inside of the Dougherty network, and here's the sun, and it would line up just like this, and that's why there's these concentric nested toroids that build up the toroidal vortexture of the filling of the vacuum, if you will, and the voids of space, bridging the gaps. So I was just like, look at that. I was like, yes. Just the imagining the sound of these whistler waves, which I think Brighton's on, right? You on?
If he's playing them and his microphone is muted, will the sound come through?
I don't know, Brighton. We can't hear it. At least I can't.
Oh, I was playing them, but my microphone was muted.
Good call, Heather. Okay.
Yay.
It's very soft, hissy whistlers, which are actually...
And in the right channel, we're hearing the beginnings of chorus.
Sounds like
when he's talking about the channel, he's talking about tuning into the frequency that the chorus is playing at on his audio receiver.
Oh, wow. Sounds like the ocean and fire.
I bought some radio part this weekend. If anybody wants to play with me, let me know.
So these sounds are cascading.
Static from something.
Of chorus.
And these are what they look like, superimposed right over the Dougherty set. Now, oh, here it is. Here's the hissing. Here's the Earth. Here's the hissing. Can I get closer on this? Yeah, let's see here if I can drag this up. Okay, here's the plasmasphere. Here's enhanced EMIC waves. The chorus waves are out here, but then they come back down into the poles and go through the Earth and into the Earth and activate charge, efficient charge distribution. This is the point that I really wanted to nail home. Eugene has a hypothesis about the deep biosphere, and the deep biosphere, basically, I wrote a couple of notes about the tenets here. Did I or did I not? Okay, yeah. He calls it the biogenic earthquake hypothesis. It's the ultra deep biosphere, and basically, the appearance of life was the start of volcanic activity, and not the other way around. So life, charge efficiently distributing itself on Earth is life. That's what life is. It wraps itself into itself via these looking for the correct word here. It uses self-organization and self-referential systems to equally disperse these sounds throughout the ocean to create creatures that also create the sound and use the sound for navigation and seeing and talking. And all communication is nothing but communication on all scales is what networks and systems are composed of. It's multiple layers of communication and interference produces these. So you have these cascading networks that come out of the poles and into the earth constantly, these sounds, and these sounds start to sculpt what we see in the oceans. It literally is the vortexture. You start to see the similarities between, that's why they're called helicon waves. They interact with matter. They pull matter into existence via electrotropism and sonotropism. So this is literally my hypothesis of how electrosonic how speciation occurs via electrosonics.
So the sounds you're talking about is basically the Schumann resonance, right?
So
No.
The Schumann resonance is like the vibration, the auditory vibration sound of the earth. It's like the ringing of the bell. It's its response to the vibrations that are happening around it. What he's talking about, and I'll just clarify a little bit about Gene's paper so that it makes more sense what Buddy's saying, is that there was a panspermia event that delivered microscopic microbial organisms to the earth, which feed off of atmospheric and telluric currents, and they absorb the charge, and in a very piezoelectric type of a way, they also disperse the charge, kind of like a respirate, or like using the bathroom, right? They just discharge, and in doing so, they create earthquakes because they do so at a collective, like they together collect so much charge and then they let it go. And when that happens, it creates all kinds of things, including different types of metals. It brings water up. It changes things underneath the ground, and they're all kind of happening with telluric and atmospheric currents, but mostly telluric because that's what's going through the earth, and that's where they're occupying the space that they're occupying. So the Schumann resonance is a resonance that's in relation to some of those same charges, but it isn't the charge that the organisms are being said to be responsible for digesting. Does that help?
Yes. Yeah, that helps clarify it immensely. So the charge is coming in, and it has to efficiently wrap, and in order to efficiently distribute, it actually starts protein bonding because it's helical. because it's the most efficient way of stacking and arranging things. Once the conditions are right on the Earth, due to it constantly what is it? Due to cyclical,
resonating.
due to the constant cycles of Earth, it produces this cyclical, I guess, resonance, and and there's these actual. Oh, did I press pause? Yeah, I did. Okay, so this is packing, constantly packing. We assume that the South Pole is the preponderant um, flux, where there's more field coming in the bottom and out the bottom than out the top. So it's eating. If it's alive, it's eating with its mouth right here through the South Pole and regurgitating it through the North Pole. Uh, and whilst it's doing that, it's creating life, and it's creating the dynamism of the slipping of it's creating extremophiles. The geometry of extremophiles stack and create slipping of the shelves, which all of it starts to create life, and in general, in and of itself.
Starts to create centrifugal force, and starts fighting against other wavelengths to create
Yes,
interference patterns and
the cosmos is
geometry.
the cosmos is geared towards life. It wants life. It is um, it is geared towards creating life for whatever reason.
Can we look at that one again real quick? Just the circles where you were showing the Whistler waves and their breakdown. It was a series of circles along a.
So would you say that?
Yep, that one.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Heather.
So the reason that I'm finding this interesting is a few reasons, but the first being that when you look at the very first one, you have the alternating the currents going in two different directions, right? And then when they hit that 45-degree angle, like we've been talking about before, about the shape of, say, the hexagon, the shape of the octagon, that degree of the angle to which the adjacent line is attached, right, is going to cause a certain type of vortical motion. It's going to create a certain type of wavelength based on the type of circle or the type of radiant that's coming at what angle coming out of it. So I don't know if that image was exactly like congruent, like it will come out this and then turn into this, turn into that, or if those are different forms of it at that charge, kind of like that cat picture that I sent you that you could tell what the temperature was by.
I agree with your theory completely.
Okay, so I think what you're saying here is you can see that they're not all just like this. They're varying. There's a bunch of different kinds. Is that what you're kind of saying? This isn't
that's kind of what I'm saying, but I'm also saying that in order to have a helical motion, you have to have a specific degree. The adjacent line has to be at a certain degree in order for it to become helical, right? It's specifically helical, which otherwise it produces a different shape to the vortex, right?
Yes,
so,
indeed. You're exactly correct, and it'll produce a different sound or a different octave, or change into a different type of streamer or sound. Yeah,
exactly. So what the angle that forces the helical shape is the bonding of the two, because it's two different spirals that are bonded together via a adjacent line that's causing a helical a spin in that direction. It's kind of like when you tie a knot only on one side and it becomes that spiral, the half knot, as opposed to a whole knot, which would be a spiral or a knot on each side, so it stays in the straight line.
Well, that's chirality. See, this is spinning this direction and this is spinning this direction. Put them together and you get both.
And hence the different elements you get.
Exactly.
Different levels of elements, rather.
Yes, and
you
it's
have your
the
hydrogen 1, your hydrogen 2. Yeah.
Yes, and it's the stacking of these helices that produces the elements. Exactly, Michael. And the angle of the dangle, the angle exactly, and how many of them are participating that are left, that create and structure organisms. Organelle are literally dependent on these sounds in order to form the siphuncle of which is what allows a chambered nautilus to be buoyant, what allows the air to so it can float in different uh, you know, varying depths in the ocean, and it's all dependent on uh, these larger sounds that are coming from the heavens. And this is what we've known, and this is what the Vikings, and this is what the Celtics have talked about. This goes back to us praying to heaven and hearing the echoes from heaven. Um, when you get into dogs communicating and howling with these sounds, because they hear them, they hear the inaudible sounds that we don't. So my supposition and my proposal is that or my hypothesis is that they hear these sounds, they interact with them, they howl back to them, and it starts to disperse the electricity efficiently and correct the environment based off of what the wolf knows needs to happen. Because when you introduce wolves, we know this very well on this show, but it creates trophic cascades. Trophic cascades are we know very much about in marine biology, but we don't know that much about on land animals and the vertebrates. But we're starting to see this and understand that when you get an apex predator and you put the apex predator, such as a wolf or a few of them, that it will start to enrich the environment, and it's with its howl that the pigs run and hide. It's with the howl that the moose run and hide and stomp and stampede and make the rivers. So this resonance idea of sonobiology and sonotropism and sound actually being the thing that is the creator goes back to Western religions with spoken into existence, goes back to Eastern religions with the Vedics and sound being how the universe came into existence. So you can see a map here that I made, and I'm just going straight for it, guys, because there's a lot of content. We can do a couple of questions or whatever afterwards, but there's a bunch of content, and as soon as I'm ready, which isn't going to be too long here, I think we're getting the basics of it. These helicon waves are actually the whistlers. Now these go into the earth and they distribute themselves and interact and pull up pine trees that I like the image that I showed earlier. They pull up and extricate things into existence. The howling of the wolf does the same, and it affects everything. It puts chills on your back. Fuck. I mean, it affects humans. We still are scared of it. When you get into lycanthropy and a bunch of other stuff that Heather can add to this, with the Nordic gods and the reason why Tuesday is Tuesday, it gets really deep. So I could open it up here because I think that's just the beginning of introducing it, and I want to touch on one more point before I open it up, and that's that that these. Thank you for whoever muted your mic. We can all hear better. Yeah, it always helps for everybody who does that. Okay. What I wanted to make sure everybody knows is the definition of a helicon wave. Sorry. I have my hands in a couple of different spots here. Okay, a helicon is a low-frequency electromagnetic wave that can exist in bounded plasmas in the presence of a magnetic field. Thus, a low-frequency electromagnetic wave may be able to overcome the skin depth problem and thereby propagate throughout the material. So,
in the bounded presence of a magnetic field, I feel like that's very important.
Right. There's other...
there was that picture of it too, and you just did that because it forces the shape of it. It's bound to this, right? It's not in a free. It's not in a free.
It turns it into a force-free field-aligned current.
Thank you, because but it's bound to the.
Yeah, it's in a cylinder. It's in a cylindrical matrix.
Yes.
It turns it. That's what I wanted to nail home, is the fact that it is, and that's where is it? That talks about it all being cylindrical. Come on, guys. Where is it? Joules, practical significance of the surface mode, ultra high. Helicons. Since then, helicons found use in a variety of scientific and industrial applications, wherever highly efficient plasma generation was required, as in nuclear fusion reactors, and space propulsion, where the helicon double layer thruster, and in the variable specific impulse magnetoplasma rocket, both make use of helicons in their plasma heating phase. Helicons are also utilized in the procedure of plasma etching, used to manufacture of computer microcircuits.
Look where it says, right there, it says, a helicon discharges an excitation of plasma by helicon waves induced through radio frequency heating. The difference between a helicon plasma source and an inductively coupled plasma, the ICP, sorry, every time I hear ICP, okay, is the presence of a magnetic field directed along the axis of the antenna. This is the important part here for, I think, what we're discussing here, because the presence of its magnetic field creates a helicon mode of operation with a higher ionization efficiency and a greater electron density than the typical ICP, because it's bound to the magnetic field. That's a very important factor.
Yes. This is the main point. I wanted to try to show that the rudimentaries of all these helicons are that they are forced into cylindrical matrices. So going back to the images here that I've shown, you can see that, which is just another picture of the other image that you saw that I shown earlier, and they're confined and they twerp. That's why you hear when you hear the sounds of these. We're going to put on some sounds here in a minute. We're going to hear ice cracking. We're going to hear frogs chirping, and some other things. We did this on last episode, but I want to hit my point home that everything is communicating with a language here, and we're starting to understand the language of it. And this is important. You can see the helicon structures here, the helicon waves. It all comes out of the Dougherty set here, the first one that I created off this inverse square root of 2. And it creates all these different types of, there's a whole bunch of different frequencies. And that's what creates the interference patterns. And this is an interference pattern. That's an interference pattern. Same thing that I was showing earlier. Right here. That's the helicon interacting and acousting, dampening on another substrate or another structure. So you can look at pine cones, and pine cones have the same type of structure and nesting of seeds, and it's a recursion of itself. So recursion and mimicry and mirroring on all scales, all the way down, is how nature is and shows itself to be. It's not all these different laws that change. These get down to the micron scale, and they cavitate. They are what creates sonoluminescence. It is what sonobiology is based off of. This is vortex dynamics, vortex science. It's all based off of the vortex.
It's beautiful. I love your depictions.
Thank you, and I hope it makes some sense to you guys, because it's making sense to me.
I was wondering. I've been curious, because in one of your depictions, with the triangle as a basis of a vectors of a vacuum, Uh, I was wondering, since you seem to be on the, you started with the 6, right? So, how many vectors do you think there are in a vacuum in a more complex, sequence like such as the 8? Like, are there do you? So there are 8 points, but how many vectors would you say?
That's a really ambiguous question. I'm not sure if I could nail that one down.
I say there's, uh, well, for say a dodecahedron, there'd be actually 12 vectors, counting the north and south pole. Um, would you agree with that?
I don't speak with vectors or scalar waves. I don't use that language because it confuses people, and it confuses me. Vectors can be understood in many different eigenvalues, I guess. You can have
Well,
a
just
point could be identified as a vector, and then a point to point could be identified as a vector. So in a dodecahedron, there's unlimited amounts, but there's only also a restrained field.
I was just thinking of its initial, say, vector of or time spaces of a atom, for instance. Like, what do you think the basic variants are for? Just to dumb it down for some.
Michael, can I save questions for later? Because I'm on a roll here.
You are always on a roll, of course.
Thank you, brother. I really appreciate it. But yeah, I have a whole bunch of content to cover, and all this is gonna start making a lot more sense because I'm gonna add. I'll go through a brief description of what I'm gonna get into right now. So after you understand that the basic hypothesis is that the sound builds the scaffolding for creatures and matter and atoms to adhere to, the food, the trees, the seeds, the conifers, the pine cones, all of this, all is extricated or pulled up into existence via sound, via interference. So Richard Merrick, I'm going to be interviewing him eventually here. We keep in contact and coordinating. But he has created something called interference theory, and it's amazing, and it has to do with harmonics and the golden mean and the golden ratio, and it works in conjunction with what I'm proposing and showing off here. So existence beyond sound and interference, the geometry of the Van Allen belts is Hopf vibrations, which is higher dimensional information processing. The Van Allen belts are out here, and that's what's creating these sounds. They get stored and processed up in here until the grunting and yearning comes back down. They're not very. You can almost not hear the sounds that we're talking about, so you need an amplifier, but you can hear them in certain places due to you can hear these whistlers and growlers and stuff in the forest, Nordic forests, because the forests act as amplifiers for the sound, thus kind of also proving my point. They act as a stereographic antenna, so a two-way antenna, transceivers for the sounds. They pull the sounds into the roots. The wolves are working off of these currents, the salmon, everything ultimately is diatoms, how they come into existence off the sounds from that are constantly ringing, and the auroral sounds. So using the Van Allen belts as 5D harmonic thermal and memorial substrates for the Earth. So let's say the Earth gets a huge CME and everything's wiped out. The memories are stored out here in a memorial substrate in the sounds of it itself. So it is self regenerating, self recurrent, self referential system. When it's broken, it can fix itself. I don't think we can break the earth personally. There's nothing that we have that's powerful enough to destroy the earth or break it. That's how, if these huge shocks from the sun ain't going to do anything to it, good luck us destroying it. So you can listening to a perpetual Hopf vibration cascading is helicon waves. And I'm going to get into Hopf vibrations, and I shared some stuff in the link here, making sure I didn't lose you guys because I've been talking to myself in a one-way conversation like a jerk. I don't mean to scare you guys off. Okay. Whistler beams. Okay. All right. I'm just going to start opening these one by one. Here's the geometry. Look at that, the antenna array. This is a really good paper about them. And okay, here we go. For many applications, it would be desirable to have a collimated beam of Whistler waves. Collimated. Birkeland current. By this we mean a cylinder of waves with circular cross sections. In free space, a laser beam without spread, blah, blah, blah. So I could go on about that. This shows the breakdown, how it starts to, I guess I could say, cavitate or spin. And the spinning produces the Bessel function, which breaks up into two different types of waves. You have these Whistler waves, and then you have this isosurface. These isosurfaces inside here are actually called a different type of wave, which is, if I wrote it down back here, of course I didn't, in my types of wave section, should be right here. Isomethal. Anyway, so this is the secondary, tertiary, secondary and tertiary waves that are created in fields that are created around these helicon waves. And if you look at it, it's exactly what I've been sculpting. So look, they come out of the matrix. They interact with electromagnetic fields and actually create heat. You guys still there?
I'm absolutely still here.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
I'm
All
listening very intently, and I am enthralled as usual.
Thank you. All right, I'll continue then, because this is. Do we have any questions? Because this would be a good time for questions before we get into the sounds of some of these things and how I propose that this is why you can speak life into existence. You can literally speak life into people's bones and in their blood, because their bones produce the blood.
Gematria, man. It's cool. But
It actually makes sense. It's
Sirens
like
for you guys.
taking the most wooiest sort of out there new age stuff and making it like completely plausible. It's
like consolidate.
mind blowing.
The good.
Yeah.
Well, it isn't exactly new age stuff, though. I mean, this is
not at all. Not at all.
This
But it
is
seems
like
it is.
ancient.
I don't mean to be disparaging at all.
No,
But
it's
from
it's
a
both.
modern perspective,
It's both.
I'm overcoming
A little column A,
I'm
column B.
I'm overcoming that mindset in order to see this and understanding how it could be perceived. I think that perception is very real. It's not an accurate perception, but this is stuff that borders on fantasy. I mean, it almost feels like barely real, right? Like it takes a minute to cope. That's why I say I always assume Buddy's right and figure I don't understand. That's been the case so often. You know?
Well, when I talked with the Electric View last weekend, a lot of them, Richard and a bunch of the guys are siding with the Dougherty network because you can just see it. You have to have a little bit of intuition, and then your mind will take you the rest of the way. you start reading about this stuff that science thinks is separate and all separate, and you start to bring it together and as a concrescence or a correlation or a compendium of things. All the strands come together. All these parts that seem separately, all coming together to explain something that I think we already knew. So it can be understood as neoteric, which is recent in times, modern, and it can also be thought of as archaic and ancient. I learned that word thanks to Word of the Day. Thank you.
That's a great word. And we throw it in there. But
Workman Publishing.
Yay. But can I just say something? Because I feel like if you're going to talk about a collimated structure that's several columns to make one column, then they're all part of the same thing. And earlier, Buddy and I were like, there was this thing about did so-and-so do something because of this motive? And it's like, no, this person doesn't, or this group of people don't believe in that way. So they wouldn't have adopted that as a motive for their actions because that isn't something that would be motivating to them. So I think that the understanding that people had once of what we're better understanding now isn't a better understanding what we have. It's actually a different understanding because we're seeing it from our current perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to apply our current perspective.
Such an important distinction.
Right, the way they saw it. And it's the same exact thing from two different contexts, which makes both of them simultaneously and as much so true. So to discount the way that they saw it is doing ourselves a great disservice, because if we can somehow adopt all of these philosophies into the greater understanding, then we'll be able to actually see what's going on, because it reaches far beyond the physical. It reaches far beyond what science is like surprised that it is, when spirit already knew that it was that, because it's in your DNA to know that that's what it is anyway.
Yep. We were instructed this. We knew all this stuff. That's what God is. That's what God is, the fabric of space-time, and it's telling us the same mimicry that we've been doing eternally.
Right.
If you were to look at the North Pole, this would look just like auroras coming down on you in sheaths and collimated cylindrical sheaths. We did an episode about this. And this, we can't forget that every episode that we've done thus far is the same exact geometry. I'm just showing stuff that's inside of there inherently. This is already there, you know?
Well, you're making connections. That's what's happening. And not only are you making connections, but you're making connections with other people who are seeing these same ideas. I have a couple of quick questions, and I don't know, you can dismiss, I don't know how much relevance they have. But first of all, with respect to plutonic solids, is it possible that there is a resonant frequency that is akin to or in relationship with the plutonic solids, and is that possibly is there a connection there with the sound and the basic resonant plutonic solids that we understand to be true? These foundational shapes, do they have accompanying sounds?
Indeed.
So tell me about the relationship between the plutonic solids and these resonant frequencies.
Okay. For that, we're while you were talking, I happened to be right there, and this is we went into this a little bit on one of the episodes already, but since Michael had a question about the platonic solids, this is a dodecahedron, and when a dodecahedron nests concentrically inside of itself in this manner, it produces phase conjugation and creates these pine cone. When it spins inwardly and downwardly, it creates these pine cones, which is the chirps and exactly what we've been looking at. So good point, Michael. That's right on. These are Whistler waves.
Hey, buddy.
Yes.
Just looking at your right here at this image and what you were saying about the pine cone, it makes me think, and this one on the right, like a flower, almost, well, like a flower, like the Venus kind of orbit. Do you know how it goes back and forth? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that you could really come up with something. I've been thinking of the helical solar system model instead of the, you know, like a flat pancake or a disc like the heliocentric. I think this could be the answer to that. And I mean, you're. I just have like the idea, and I've heard some people, like I posted that bats, helical. Well, is it? Yes, like a kind of, it calls it vortex.
Sonar.
Solar system, the solar system model of the solar system. How the
Yes.
sun would be at this right in the center here, and then the planets would go in sort of like this, following these different waves.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And it's opening up, and then so they're not around the sun, they're behind the sun, following. And the bigger planets, because they have the repulsion, attraction and repulsion, like Jupiter, Uranus, Saturn, Neptune, they couldn't get close to the sun. They would have to stay further on the outside parts, and then the smaller planets get pulled towards the inner solar system. And that's what I kind of think that'd be really cool if you could work on that. Like take your time, of course, because it requires. But I think that's kind of like the answer. And then the planets would share some of these currents.
Yep.
In different levels, different
sympathetic resonance. Exactly.
Yes,
Sympathetic
yes.
resonance.
Exactly.
Yes, I was thinking, I don't know if it popped up, sonar system. Instead of when you said that, when you were talking about that, Tessa, made me think, oh, instead of solar system, it's a sonar system where it's all this sound.
You guys
Mind
know,
blown.
so cool. Anyway, so hope you can work on that, because you're like right on it. It's amazing, and what you're doing is fabulous.
It's great to hear your voice, Tess.
Thank you. Yours too.
Hey.
I'm just like in awe, like Michael, like wow. You guys are awesome. Anyway, so thank you.
Yes, that great points, Tess. What happens is platonic solids are minimal energy configurations. They are minimal surface and maximum energy efficiency. So they're packed with the least amount of sides, least amount of numbers that allows them to work. So when they spin, they create sounds, and when they spin, that's what we witness. That's what we witness as plasmoids. This is a plasmoid. Almost everything is a plasmoid. I think we're plasmoids, and I think all living creatures are plasmoids. And
You're a plasmoid.
your epidermis is
I was
plasmoid.
totally just thinking the same thing. So
What'd you call me?
In the geometric group chat, I've put up 2 photos, and it goes to show the helical universe, or helical solar system. And I'm noticing that there's a toroidal induction that our magnetosphere has, and that toroidal induction by north and south pole follows on the helix. The north is the front of the helix, and the south is the back part of the helix going backwards in rotation. It's in the geometric group Skype call.
Yeah.
In the chat, yeah.
Yeah. I seen your image that you posted. But yeah, you're talking about is literally what this guy did the math on.
Yeah.
I keep going back to this guy, but you're right. There's a leading string and a trailing string, and everything is on these hyperdimensional toruses, these stacked toruses. And I shared a bunch of links in the chat here. I'm answering questions and jumping around. So let me get back down to the chat here. Go ahead, keep going, Brighton.
These, the helical structures, the Earth's magnetosphere is a helix or a flexahedron. I remember we talked about the flexahedron. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with that, so I might as well drop that in here as well. But both of these structures, it's a way of looking at that they're almost energy input, energy output. North pole is the energy input, south pole is the energy output, and it's going along the helix in that fashion, where there's only a forwards in the helix and the backwards is past. And so we can actually look at the helical structure as a timeline.
Yes.
There's an image, and it's just at the very bottom of the chat. And I'm going to drop a a flexahedron as well.
Okay. I can't get to the bottom of the chat just yet because I'm scrolled so high up into a place right now in the chat.
Okay.
And then we're going to start sharing some. Well, I'll go to it, but then I want to start sharing some of the links one by one because they're in chronological order to explain my theory, based off of twistors, Roger Penrose, hop vibrations, what this geometry is, what helicons are, why it's all helical, and how it gets broken down into the Van Allen belts and why the Van Allen belts are so important. Like I was talking about, how they're almost like the ambrosia of the memory, them coupled with the soil and the soil being able to rebound the memory out of, you know, the lichen and whatever and whatnot. Where am I? Okay, here I am. There it is. Okay, so this is kind of what Brighton was talking about here. And this was hypothesized by many different people. Actually, this is pre-Socratic. This goes back to pre-Socratic times. And they were right. We just didn't listen to them. Anaximander was one of the first people to explain this, what was known as the cosmic serpent at the time, or the great serpent.
I want to point out one concept that's not diagrammed in that I'm trying to point out here, is that there's a torus eating the timeline, as if the torus is,
Yes, that's the beginning of that's what makes the helix.
And each planet has their own torus. Each planet, like the Earth, has its own torus, which is the magnetosphere. The Sun has its own torus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and those are basically Van Allen belts.
Well, and I wonder if the shape of the torus
multiple
is shape
torus
at the bottom of the pole. You know, like the shape of the bottom of the pole would be the indicator of the shape of the, like the how squashed or how spherical that torus might be.
It's because everything's hollow. Nothing is solid. There's no such thing as solids in nature. Nothing touches, therefore everything's hollow. If nothing touches, then probably the center of the nucleus isn't touching either. And everything's streaming out of the center of nuclei, and we're the edge of the universe and constant expansion.
Yes, and I just had this really thought about Uranus, about this weird thought about Uranus, because it's perpendicular, right? It's like rolling. So like a rolling torus instead of it's got a little bit. So what?
So
that
buddy, yeah, here's a great example. This is a flexahedron Brent just posted.
This guy.
Yes, and then there's a rotating one, a GIF, if you go back one. Or if you... Okay, you're going to have to click X. You're going to have to exit. Yeah, and actually click the video. Yeah, so this is a rotating flexahedron. It's a little bit frame by frame, a little bit choppy, but it's the same thing as a torus. And if you imagine the planet at the very apex in the very center... I would say
it's similar to a torus, not the same.
But it's toroidal.
Yeah, it works the same property. I just want to just to be correct in specificities.
Okay, if you could go back a few photos.
Well, to support you, Brighton, that's what I'm talking about. Like that angle.
That one right there.
Torus would be a more squatty torus.
This one.
Yes. So this yellow line right here is
doing the flop.
Okay. Yeah. The magnetosphere is where those twistors are that cause those sounds in the whistlers. And this yellow line is the larger torus, which is the gravitational pull that our sun has. But there's the torus, this torus of the magnetosphere keeps rotating along as if it's eating the timeline or moving along this timeline of the rotation. And so if you go back one image, the other way. So that yellow line is right here, the blue line. That blue line on this is the yellow line. And so there's an actual torus going along the timeline. I actually wanted to point this out because later there's an interesting hypothesis I'm working with Grant on. I want to get into some deeper conversations with him on it about how entropy works with toroidal functions, how time can only be seen once, and if every pixel or every particle in space, every part of space has already had, time has already been through every point in space. And it involves this same mechanical concept, but I think this is a great way to show that example.
Indeed.
Of how a torus goes along a helix.
Yes, this is the very center of the hypothesis of what all of us are leaning towards. The electric universe is the helical universe. The helical universe is correct, and we're starting to understand this 4D and 5D geometry. And just to humble all of us, because we all stumble upon this great serpent, some of us, some thinkers, along the line. And I want to read a book. I want to read a passage out of The Space-Time Origin of the Universe, Vladimir Ginsburg, page 1. 1.1, Anaximander of Miletus, the Greek, 611 BC. The Greek natural philosopher Anaximander of Miletus proposed the idea of the vortex that closely resembled the mythological cosmic whirl. At any given time, he professed there existed an infinite number of worlds that would have been
Lost audio, buddy.
Yeah, I think you muted. Your mic went off or something.
All right.
I could just see him getting super excited and accidentally pushing his button.
It doesn't actually show that he has his mic on mute, so I think his computer mic might have broken.
Oh no.
Yeah, that'd be bad.
That would be.
The screen is bad.
I love these
Heather,
moments. It's like
I
a
have a
movie.
question for you.
Sorry?
Are you familiar with
and then Socrates came. And there's a bunch of other philosophers that started to explain this vortex theory. And
Buddy, we lost you for a while.
Empedocles.
Buddy, we lost you for a while. I don't mean to interrupt you, but we don't know what you're talking about right at the second because we missed like a big chunk of what you were saying.
Oh man, I don't know how.
All you were reading though, so if that helps you backtrack to where you were, we heard a portion of what you read, and then you cut out.
Okay, well, I guess the Greek philosopher. Did you guys? Okay, basically, this guy 611 BC laid it down that it's a vortex universe, and then other people came after Anaximander. Anaxagoras came out in a book of 500 BC, The Nature of Things, and he introduced his version of the creation of the universe by vortex motion. Like Anaximander, he made it an ambitious attempt to employ vortex motion to explain the creation of the universe. I didn't want to get into all this stuff because I wanted to do a whole episode on vortexes, but I'm just briefly touching some of the history because
technically we are. I mean, you got it.
Right. So Empedocles thought that the Earth hovered in an upward draft in the primordial vortex. That is exactly what's going on. This guy was 500 BC, 490 BC. So Heather was right. I'm right. Brighton's right. We're all leaning towards what's right here. And there's a...
High five, guys. High five.
Well, and I'm not the one to delegate what's right and what's wrong, but we're all hypothesizing that this helical model is leaning us towards the right direction. So after all that said, I want to get back into the comments and take Brighton and I to the beginning of today, 4:20 this morning when I started posting stuff. Hopefully you guys, I didn't wake up anybody.
Nice.
And we're going to go through line by line and open these up because it tells a story. And I believe the story starts with hop vibrations. And Joe Rogan.
Do you think that like the reason we know so much more about underwater primordial geometric shapes and animals or mitochondria is because the ether is or the ethereal with the ocean that they're in is so much denser? I mean, that's why fish are so much more sensitive to electricity.
I think yes. We can see trophic cascades a lot more observably if we introduce one thing to the environment. We can see the damage easier in the water because the substance is a lot closer together. And yeah, there is more charge in the ocean.
And I bet.
And salt water though too, right? Because fresh water behaves differently.
How long is this? Okay, 1 minute 27.
This one we're not going to listen to just yet. I'm going to try to pull them up.
If you want to post the link in the chats, in the group chat, I can pull up the audio every time. It's a lot easier that way.
I know that I tried to do it this way, and I was going to see if it worked.
Oh, yeah, I know which one. I found it.
Okay, yeah. You got it, Joe Rogan?
Yep.
And then we're going to go down one after another after that. And some of them we're going to listen to, some of them not.
Okay. So, where down where? On your Facebook?
On the Skype chat.
Okay.
Yeah. Link by link on the Skype chat. So try to stay with me there if you could, Brighton. Thanks.
I will.
Awesome. So go ahead and press play whenever you want. They're just going to talk for like a minute here, and then we're going to stop this.
Image of the fundamental unit that you need to appreciate what gauge symmetry is all about. And I had Jamie load it up under the tab called Planet Hopf. And this is going to be
HOPF?
HOPF.
What the fuck am I looking at?
You are looking at the most important object in the universe.
What? That looks like some trippy
Go ahead and pause it
on your laptop.
Take another puff, my friend.
I just wanted everybody to hear that because this is being introduced to the public, and everybody who's all like anti, everybody who's in the mainstream needs to just chill, take a chill pill. The word's getting out, but it gets out slowly. And if this guy has his own podcast, Eric Weinstein, whatever, he has his own podcast. It's pretty good. It's actually really good. But he knows what he's talking about, and he's talking about it being a hop vibration. Do you see the same type of cyclonic action happening like Brighton was talking about with the folding of the circulating of the toroidal fields around the Earth? Those would be the Van Allen belts and other circulatory systems on the outside. Those are hop vibrations. So what we're hearing is hop vibrations. I'm going to pull up an image of a hop vibration, which I've already shared some to the group, but whatever. It's easy enough to type it in. And I already shared some videos, and I think that's probably the next few videos. This is one of them, Niels Johnson. So you can see the nested layers of this. Very simple what a hop vibration is. You can see it.
And this is what you're talking about as far as starting to introduce multiple dimensions.
Yes, this is one dimension.
Yeah.
Now you introduce another one on top of it, and it becomes it becomes the next dimension. But it's just because it's one dimension doesn't mean it's one dimensional or two dimensional or three dimensional. It has its own dimensionality to it. I'm pretty sure a torus is 4-dimensional. Could be 3. I don't really care. But
a torus is 3-dimensional. There are 4th-dimensional toruses, though.
That's awesome.
So, Brighton's right on that. Take his word for it. I remember studying them for a bit, but you see how they can get wrapped up, and you can get multiple layers of these. Look at that. And this is what I'm very simple way. These are on the micro scale and on the macro scale, and we can see them around every planet. And it's around every human. It's our toroidal field. You can expand it with your heart. You can play with them with your chakras. They're a bioplasma field.
Yeah. And it's an algorithm becoming. It starts out simplistic, and through repetition of fluctuations,
And the same shape.
the algorithm encompasses itself by recognizing all the variables that are going on, and then winding another filament, I guess you could call it, of consciousness around that.
Just like a shell in the shell geometry we're going to get into.
Yes, sir.
The sound builds the scaffolding, then even scaffolding for matter. The sound builds the scaffolding.
Have you read Walter Russell?
Oh, my work is in the museum. I opened up the grand opening of the Walter Russell Museum for the first time. I am Russell. I am every human. We all are. We just don't recognize it.
So it starts out idea, right? Before
idea is in the sound. It's in the ether. It's in the preeminent
it's in the void.
It's in the what does he call that? The pre-ether and pre-water. There's such thing as pre-water and post-water. And Walter Russell discovered heavy water. That's why he got his doctorates. He got his doctorates by just writing an article in the New York Times telling people where to find heavy water. We looked, found it, and he got his doctorates because he earned it.
It's beautiful. Like
this is what it all is. This is what it all is. So, and I didn't find it. You didn't find it. Nobody found it. We knew it. We intuit it. We got it. So nobody can claim it. Everything needs names, sure. So certain things are named. You need to know what a Newton is. You need to know what a Tesla is. These are increments and measurements, or an ohm, and they all come from the founder of who discovered it.
Joules and hertz, bro.
It combines the origin of the theory with the person who came up with the idea of it. So I like naming things after the people because it keeps it together in a nice, neat little package. Hence the name, the Dougherty Set and the Dougherty networks. So I'm doing bubble sculpting, and bubble sculpting is freaking awesome. And just going to this distracted me. All right. So we're back in the comments here, and I started to name which ones are which. Sound to tune your ears. Let's listen to that one, Brighton. 5:44 a.m. And I'll look at the one before that to see what it is. Excuse me, guys. Bear with me in the commercials and as we're moving into these. I think this is just video footage. Yeah, this is just good video footage to describe what we're talking about. So this basically blows Darwin's origin theory of species out of the water and introduces not only sound, but an electrosonic induction type of creation. And then, yeah, Brighton, if you could play the video right after this. We can't hear it. I don't know if you're playing it. Turn it down a little bit, please. Thank you.
sound of harmony.
I just love the us being able to play these and listen to them. It's soothing. I went back and listened to the last episode, and when nobody was talking and we were just listening to the sounds, it was so soothing. I need to shut up more.
It is soothing.
So let's hop to the next one. Brighton, the next one after that. Looks like the sound of Saturn. Let's hear what the sound of Saturn is. And we're going to start putting all these sounds into shapes. Like a happy little tree. Right, and that's a shape right there. Look at that shape. That looks like your what you guys are playing with.
Yeah.
Twisting.
Beautiful.
So this is the sound of Saturn.
That's what I wanted to see for a long time, buddy. The magnetic force on a tabletop related to the magnetic force around the Earth, and they just did a visual on it. I've wanted to see that for so long.
I'm gonna play it again right here. Yep. Superimposed. It's a combination of magnetohydrodynamics. So what I'm doing is I'm coupling plasma physics with magnetohydrodynamics and turning it into a theory of an origin of species theory. I think it's a lot more plausible than Darwin's. But they do cascade off of each other, so they build the bodies for each other to become the next creatures. So I do agree with some of that. Man, it's just gorgeous. All right, now if we
when they slow down the crickets and it sounds like a symphony, if that's because it sounds like crickets, kind of what it would sound like at like a slower, lower pace. It would have that melody.
Birds obviously chirp in a similar way as well.
Okay, so what's this one, Brighton? Birds?
That was the same one as sounds that tune the ears. You posted it twice.
Oh, okay. Okay. If you could go to the next one then.
Yeah.
That's frogs.
This is the Van Allen periodic chorus.
Wow. Oh my gosh. You'd think it's frogs. Wait till you hear the spring peepers. Oh, and I'm going to go to it. Okay. Yeah, because I can go to that one. I'm going to show you what he's seeing or what he's playing. It's 30 seconds, right, Brighton?
Yeah.
There it is.
No, this isn't the same one as what you're playing.
Spring peepers?
Hold on.
Oh, no, that's different. So they're like this. That's basically just a chart. It's fine. We don't have to sync it up, Brighton.
Yeah, I got it. This is the spring peepers.
Oh, so this is spring peepers. Wow. Yeah, just take it and narrate what the sounds are, please, for us, one after the next, until we get
rocks on ice.
This would be a great place to skip a rock. Dude, it'll never go in. And look at that. Perfect skipping rock right there. Here we go. Whoa! Whoa! Damn, I gotta do that again. This is awesome. All right, here we go.
Wow.
It's so good.
Yes.
Oh
Yes,
my
we're doing
gosh.
this. All right. Bombs
Now
away.
he's got a big rock.
Yeah, it goes right in. It shatters. That's what we just heard. Oh, that's great.
I love this. This is awesome. I'm getting way
Okay.
too much joy out.
Next one, please. All right.
Sound of ice.
That sounds like some humping.
Yeah, that's
to
a
me.
jam and ice.
Oh, baby! I like how those people. Oh, we can't hear it yet, Brighton.
Yeah, it's on now.
Now we can hear it. Wow. Okay, so pause it for a sec. Okay, so those sounds that we're hearing are the sound of they're the sound of the cracking going all the way across and through the surface, hitting the shoreline and bouncing back off. That's why they sound like the same as that sound the same or similar as the choruses that we hear inside the Northern Lights. And I want to bring to this again now my my point here is that birds make sounds like this, frogs make sound like this, all sorts of things make sounds like this, and it's the emergence of it's basically the emergence and the umbilical cascading of all characters is what sound is.
Beautiful.
So the frogs hear it while they're sleeping. They wake up and they make the same noises. Oh, it's so satisfactory. All right, let's check out the next one here. Ooh, this next one's fun, I think. What do we got?
Dropping ice down a hole, is that the one?
Yeah.
Yeah, this one's gonna be awesome.
Got an ad.
That's fine.
Oh, that
This
sounds
is the
like
one.
dubstep, like some
Yeah,
sort
this
of
is the one.
mad remix.
That reminds me of the gun that goes "Ayuga"
Exactly.
or the horn.
That's so like, oh, I was that part.
That's nuts.
I'm getting a
dude.
strong Roadrunner vibe.
Yeah. It's crazy noise.
Totally Wesley Webbit.
Well, this isn't our first time playing with cylinders, that's for sure. That noise had to come from somewhere, and I proposed it was a cylinder. And remember those things that when you twirl them, they go, you know, and they change noises. Those are cylinders too.
Well, but also it depends on what the cylinder is made of and what you're dropping down is. So it's interesting, like dropping ice down there. How deep is that hole? And then like because it sounds like there's like an acceleration of some kind and then like a release. So it's like building up air in front of it or something as it's going down and gaining.
Like it builds up charge, like a packet, a quantized packet, like you can almost see like a wave shape to it, you know. At least I can. All right, what do we got next? So I guess that one kind of takes us to a different. I think that was the last of the sounds.
Yeah, it is.
And then it gets into the absorption and excitation of helicon waves, and then back to the beginning of the episode where I started talking. Let me pull up twistors, and then it's open game and we can talk about this. Twister theory. Now, this is what we're seeing and hearing and dealing with. This is it. But it's so hard to do the differential geometry of these that Roger Penrose backed down. And if he couldn't do it, no one else so far has stepped up to do.
But see right here where it says incident relations. No, scroll back up. You just scrolled down past it. It was like one up. This right here. And then the underneath one that says Sir Roger Penrose, just like you were saying. So he has 3 points of axis, and this one has 6, right? 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah,
8.
and that might kind of.
I think you might find to you guys, just because I have a very visual imagination, but I'm also very gesticulate, and then I go fast, and so I don't have the accuracy that you guys have. But I really feel like Michael was saying at the beginning, the number of indices has a huge significance on the shape of the toroid, the way that it circulates, the degree at which it circulates. I think that the missing factor that hasn't been equated is the shape of how many interacting vectors are happening to create the toroid.
Right. You can have a toroid with 7 spins, 8 spins, but it's gonna affect the torsion or the torque within the toroid. You have more, it becomes tighter wound. You have less, it becomes less wound.
And the perimeter of its field, you know?
Yeah.
There's an example of this in the group chat down at the bottom. Direct belt spinors instead of twistors, where spinors show the vortexture, kind of how Saturn has like 16 vortex in its whole system, or 12 vortex in its whole system, and it goes to show that kind of model on a cube. With that kind of model, if you actually pull up the other video first, we can see it on a cube, the vortexture. Now, spinors, they use 720 degrees of rotation. They relate to this hot vibration in twistors because this is how we see and model in physics every point in space. This is actually, this video, I believe, was on the Joe Rogan hot vibration video that you pulled up earlier.
Yes, I remember seeing it on there.
How does this belt trick change its activity on an isodecahedron?
On a dodecahedron? Well,
or any other multifaceted shape that has
isodecahedron.
Well, this right here is a cube.
20-sided one.
You'll see that on a dodecahedron, none of the lines will overlap or go through each other because they're always doing 720 degrees of rotation. I could give an example with my hand with a cup, but I'd have to steal the screen to do that.
Brighton, it's a good example, but unfortunately, it's flawed because it's closed. It's a closed system. It needs to be open. But you're right. It's a good example of something that
720
that can spin. There's a lot of good examples of this mathematical model. But one thing is that it needs to be geared into every other circuit of every other planet. And all the other charge that's coming from the sun, from Arcturus, you know, and all the minefields that are coming from. So like it's like this, yes, probably similar. You could also see the toroidal action. You could go out and show higher dimensional toroidal actions with this. But continue, please, Brighton.
Buddy, if I can actually just jump in, because
sure.
This is, I think Brighton, I sent this to you way back when. This is the idea of the unity pixel, and very similar to how the Dougherty set, how this pixelated microcosm and macrocosm
could communicate. Like that's a node. Exactly. And these are that makes a lot of sense.
This is more metaphoric than
right.
That video right there, the 59-second one down at the bottom, up one, is beautiful, beautiful. Also, is it this one or is it the other one right up there? But what it shows is how the particle always follows the observer, and this is why, and this is also the Dirac belt trick. I think it's actually the other video. I think it's the top one right there. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's entangled, and it's probably induced, and induction and entanglement is
diatoms.
Yeah, so the observer, the universal observer, or the particle observer is always focused and directed towards you. And so here you can actually see a toroidal function, whether it be a particle like an electron, in, say, experiments with quantum entanglement or superpositioning. And right here, this is the perfect example. The particle is always facing you, no matter which way the rotation is.
Yeah.
This is its previous spin.
What's the name of that?
Dirac belt.
Dirac belt?
Dirac belt, yeah.
Huh. But there should be a name in that, and like, you know what I mean? Like.
Yeah.
Biologically or something.
Well, from this perspective, I believe that there's an internal and an external view of even reality. So this would be the intrinsic versus the extrinsic.
Yeah.
So always in that way, you have the interior perspective of whatever scope you're talking about. You know, if you're talking about the electron, or if you're talking about an organ or an organism or Gaia, there's an internal isness, experiential of the whole.
Yes.
There's an external, you know, and you're pointing this perfectly. Like this is the internal, the intrinsic.
Yep. And it's attached to the explicate, implicate, David Bohm style too. You know, I love Alan Aspect and David Bohm.
Yes.
And the beginning of quantum theorists. I'm so.
This one's fucking. Sorry, this one's crazy.
I'm so not for people who are against, like, vehemently against things. Like there's something wrong with people who are so vehemently against some theories for some reason. Like, because there's so much truth in even in all religions. There's so many truths in each one. It's like, dude, stop hating. Hate is where you at.
Schopenhauer quote one time that said, "At first things," and I'm going to paraphrase this. At first things are vehemently opposed as, you know, like abject rejected.
Yeah.
And then things are vehemently debated, and then things are kind of just basically accepted as the nature of
truth.
Of truth.
Yes.
You know, it kind of goes through those stages.
Yeah.
Plato?
Yeah, I think Plato said that, or he was quoted in saying that. Other people were quoted in saying that. That's an ancient one.
That's cool.
Schopenhauer, I've heard, said it. So, you know, when a lot of people say it, there's some truth there. Or someone's stealing it. Someone wants the credit. I like that idea. I'll put my name on it.
There's a new word I learned just yesterday, and it's voxel. And a voxel is a third-dimensional pixel. I think it's a wonderful way of explaining, in a singular word, what a third-dimensional pixel is, or a focus.
Yes, you hit the net. That's the word of it, Brighton.
Yeah.
That's the implicate and the explicate in one word is a voxel, and it's conscious.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's morphing. And we are, or should I say, the neutrinos are these voxels, and these voxels do morph, which changes how electrons are either charged or their functions or their rotation, because an electron is made out of 10 neutrinos. Down at the bottom of the group chat,
every electron is made of 10 neutrinos?
Yes. Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah. So I've just been making these, and the video here, it shows.
I don't see a link, bro.
Right here. I'll drop the video. Hopefully it works. Yeah, it should work now.
Okay.
Video's coming right up.
All right.
It's about 56% loaded.
All right.
But the images there also, the bottom two images.
These two?
Yes. Yeah. Because they relate to this video.
Oh, I thought that was part of the video. Okay.
Yes, the video is about these two images.
Okay.
And it's at 75%.
Yes.
So
I love these so much.
This is a honeycomb. And there's this new word I've come up with, which is geosynthesis. I'd like to get this word out there. It's the experience of being the morphing form, the experience of existing as the morphology of these honeycombs, or morphing of a form.
Wouldn't that be life? Wouldn't that be life, though? That another synonym for life, right?
Life, yes. And I'm focusing on this in relation to the morphing of particularly Euclidean forms, uniform tilings. There's the video just loaded, and but if you go across one image, other way, yes, yeah, that's right. This shows what the video has and how it's all based on square roots, which the video will come up in a second. And it's all based on 90 degrees in square roots, and it's a uniform tiling in the second dimension. But what's interesting about this is you can observe the second dimension and the third dimension as exactly the same tiling. If you go across one, you can see the video. And I think it states something about how our universe is holographic if neutrinos or sphere packing is constant, is uniform.
Well, on the micro level and Planck or subplanck level, it's probably more uniform in living creatures, in crystallography and things like that. But in other places, I wouldn't expect the structure to be as uniform.
All right.
Myself, I mean, it's like
scales, it becomes less this Euclidean format becomes less noticeable, becomes more chaotic, and so it breaks apart. This kind of distribution. However, at subatomic scales, what we have in sphere packing is uniform tilings. And these uniform tilings have slight morphologies, but they're continuous in trying to fill the space.
This is precisely because no atoms touch, nothing touches. So this could be a nucleus, and we've seen this with the dispersion, the even dispersion of atoms. You throw a bunch of atoms together, and they're going to create a grid like this. They equally space themselves out to connect each other in the most efficient manner. You know, so you're right. They do create these straight lines, but the straight lines are I'd say, yeah, field aligned parts of the field aligned current. Continue, please.
Okay.
You mind if I say something to Brighton? Just jumping on
Yeah,
us. I actually totally, I totally agree with you. This is very similar. This idea that this also may be either metaphoric, but not metaphoric, etheric or representational of the architecture behind the scenes, the ley lines by which all form aligns themselves. And you use the term, genuflexing between the various polymorphic shapes that can unfurl between these two. This kind of shows the equations and the lines by which they move from one shape into another shape within that architecture.
It's like the fascia. It's like the fascia or fascia.
Yes, this is a beautiful example that I want to share.
Yes.
I'm talking with another friend, Waylon Gomez, but I'm noticing that this kind of morphology and honeycombs is not just subatomic. It becomes more chaotic in larger structures, but it exists. And the question is fascia conscious? Now, fascia is a wireframe web of these cylindrical beams. You can see it in the image that has the two there. The middle one, yeah. Those cylindrical beams, and they're encompassed by amorphous space, the gaps in between. Those cylindrical beams in the next image across in the part 3, they're made out of hardy collagen fibers, stretchy elastin fibers, and this wet ground substance. And most of it is water. Most of those beams are water. Now, fascia, in order for it to tighten and loosen around the muscle groups, electrons are sent through the ground substance, the water, into the elastin fibers, which use this energy to redirect the collagen fibers, the hardy collagen fibers. And reorientation of these collagen fibers morphs the fascial wireframe, wireframe of cylindrical beams. Now, that kind of extremity of computational power, which allows you to, it allows balance and movement of muscles. It undoubtedly requires a consciousness. It's a macrocosmic example of the form that consciousness communicates through. The dimensional wireframe connecting all particles through amorphous space. In number 4, you can actually, the 4th image there, you can see the wireframe between, or the electrical charge frame, or the bubble field frame between particles. And it's exactly the same thing as the fascia, but at larger scales, of course. These are all induced fields. They're all frames.
What I understand, I thought, is the muscles are piezoelectric, and is it so is the fascia running the electrical current through and around and well, no, because those are in nerve bundles and nerve fibers.
I could try to get into depth on this. It was in my deep conversation with my good mate, Waylon Gomez. He came over and we were discussing how your neurons, electrons are sent through your neurons in the myelin sheath down to the neuron ends, which then change the electrical charge into chemical signals, which get sent out as like orbs of chemicals, whatnot, into your muscles, which will relax and tighten the chains, kind of like the elastin
of the collagen
chains in your muscles.
Yeah.
But that's not what this is about. This is really interesting because if you imagine that as a conductive wire, your muscle is a conductive wire of, bipyramidal segments that genuflect, tighten, loosen. And the electrical charge gets distributed from the muscle outwards into the fascia, and the fascia absorbs the free electrons, the free radical electrons, uses those to then tighten and surround form around the muscle.
And that's oftentimes what needs to be massaged is the fascia, not your muscle.
Yeah.
And that's what hurts, and that's what a knot is, and you can masseuse it out and relieve the whole muscle here by massaging this area.
There's another video in the group chat. It's above the fascia.
Well, just real quick for the audience, I wanted to let them know that this is, by all means, for everyone in the world, a new organ that was just discovered recently within the past 5 years. When did they discover it?
I don't know about that.
They recognized it as an organ.
Oh, maybe it's recognized as an organ, but I had a kind of massage done called rolfing, ROLF, which is the massaging of the fascia to
deep tissue.
Yeah,
it's very painful to have it done, but it puts, because the way she described it was like kind of how you said it was like when your sleeve and your sweater is twisted inside your coat, and you can't get your coat on comfortably.
Yeah.
So basically, like, go in and massage the fascia back into place, like straightening your sleeves out, and then your coat's more comfortable. That's it is painful because it's an intense massage.
And it's necessary.
It's basically a beating.
Yeah.
I love beating.
Yeah.
I have to adjust every mirror in my car when I got it.
It's like light at BDSM, like, or I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Yeah, no, you're right.
But like, I mean, because you gotta get it
in a good way, but not like that.
Yeah, you gotta get an elbow in that freaking shoulder blade. Like, dude, I had it done to me, and it rewired my whole system. I believe in what you're talking about, Brighton. Can someone look up, or maybe I can look up, when was the fascia recognized as an organ? Brighton, you're a faster typer. Sounds like he's already on it.
It's been fairly recently that I read about it, so like in the last 6 months.
If you know, one more thing in here with the myofascia is that it's actually also we talked about this. Kohlberg talked about this. Keller about it being the psychological armoring. And the kind of the clench of life, you know, so as you hold your body, your fascia actually strangulates the muscles.
Tightens.
That can actually cause chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia.
Yeah.
And, you know, things. So it's like, how do you relax in your body and allow yourself to be, from a Tai Chi perspective, allow your skeletal system to support itself without needing to hold your body, but allowing your center to actually almost, we talked about the floating in an ocean, you know, last week, versus needing to swim in the ocean. How can you let your skeletal system support itself, and you get to be that center point behind it all, versus struggling or willing or holding or protecting, you know? So you get to be on that inside and outside, but without holding patterns.
So this the fascia thing you were talking about is interstrunium, which is a part of the fascia. It's not, fascia wasn't a new organ found. The interstrunium was a new organ.
The interstitial or something like that, right? Interstrat.
Yeah, and it's been known for the last, it looks like, but this sounds a little bit hazy, looks like it's been known for the last 25 years.
Okay.
Yeah, but only come out, you know, more publicly recently.
Okay.
There's a video in the group chat, and it involves, let's see, Maximilian Falsgraf, his work with the morphing of honeycombs. And it goes to show exactly what a voxel is. It's the most recent video. It's just above the fascia. All right. Now, this is geosynthesis. This is the experience of being the form and morphing as the form. If we look at Romanesco, we can see that it tries to structurally grow to fill space with its phi ratio spirals. If we look at an onion, its rings and bubbles that it makes, concentric spheres, it grows in a fashion to maximize efficiency and fill the space. That's exactly what this is. This is an example of morphing of uniform tilings, and how the universe, or should I say uniform tiling, may communicate. If you've ever seen Snake, the game Snake, think of the snake itself as a fourth dimensional entity that has to go through time. It's time itself. And every pixel is a third dimensional point in space. Now, playing Snake, this snake has to go through all of time and be at every moment in space for the universe to exist.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we think of that snake as say a Hilbert curve, if you want to go to my real space, all right, if you want to, let's see, yeah. It's
real space, like, hang on, I'm trying to show an example of what you're talking about mathematically. Because
the snake?
Yeah. They're called real space-like slices and time-like slices. So maybe you don't know, or maybe I can show everyone, because what you're talking about is something. And real space-like slice, okay, time-like slices, real.
Well, this theory takes this concept of the snake and says, hey, the snake might be going through a uniform tiling. And the thing about Hilbert curves, whether they're fourth, fifth dimensional, and there's other forms of Hilbert curves, there's dragon curves that are...
Is this it, Brighton?
No, it's at my Facebook.
Oh, okay.
I mean, at Facebook, yeah.
Okay.
You just want to go right onto my feed. It's like right at the beginning, pretty much.
All right. I'll pull my Facebook up. It takes a minute.
Yeah.
All right.
And...
but yeah, you were interesting me. Keep talking while Facebook pulls up here.
Okay, and it's the first thing you'll see with that says Hilbert curve as you scroll down. There's actually two. You're going to want to click the second one. This is mind-boggling because it takes Hilbert curves and it shows how they're third-dimensional, and it shows how also the progressive timeline of Hilbert curves. And the concept is that inside of the square, you know how the snake can't exit the walls. Let's say you're playing a third-dimensional game of Snake in a cubic room. The snake can't exit the universe. It can't exit the walls. But the snake still has to go through every moment in time. It still has to eat every apple. And that's kind of like God. If you think of God or existence or time, there is an inside and there is an outside. There is no such thing as no, this is my website. Yeah.
This is your Facebook.
It's down. You'll see a Hilbert curve. Keep going down. Keep going down. And we're almost there. One more. Actually, this one. Start with that one. Start with that one. This video blew my mind away. It explains how sound can be, how you can see through sound. and it takes a third-dimensional concept of sight and breaks it down into a second or a first-dimensional origin. And so,
excuse me. So you want me to skip images because I don't know if we can do sound or video at the same time, or if you just want to explain a concept.
yeah, explain the concept. I could do that.
I'll go to right here because this is good, the Hilbert curve.
All right, this shows how seeing with your ears. Okay, this shows a Hilbert curve, and this is the progression of a Hilbert curve. And the concept here is if we were to go zigzag across a square pixel, like if you take a photo of, say, like a lion or something, there's a lion, and you want to explain that image through sound, how would you go about doing it?
Dolphins do that, right?
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and hit the gear and go × the gear, you'll see the gear.
Okay.
Yeah. Just playback speed normal ×2. Normal.
All right here, sorry.
Okay, so this has 256 by 256 pixels. And you want the sound to go through every single pixel. You want a frequency, a higher frequency when it's darker and a lower frequency when it's not as dark. And this is how you'd go about explaining a picture through sound.
Wow.
And they go ahead and use a snake, but the thing is when you raise or lower the pixelation in the image by, like, say 8 by 8 to 250 by 250, with a snake zigzag back and forth curve, as soon as you change the pixelation, the point where you'd find an image, where you'd find the sound, drastically changes. Whereas on a Hilbert curve, it's fairly constant. It maintains the same space. And I'm not sure how far into the video it shows this image, but yeah, why not use a Hilbert curve? And yeah, if you want to scroll along, and I can tell you, keep scrolling, and I can see yeah. Right here, go back. This is perfect. Okay. Yeah. And so this shows how the origin changes, and it usually maintains the same point in space. Mm-hmm. The sound would maintain the same point in space even if you raise the pixelation.
Okay,
and the line is going through the center of every pixel.
Can I interrupt and ask a question? So this is like if Vermin were to want to say the sound of a snake, or
yeah,
are we talking because they use certain language,
they're taking
nature,
a second dimensional image and turning it into a first dimensional concept.
Yeah, like birds and crows would be the smartest to be able to do this because they can speak to almost all nature.
Right. If you want to go ahead and jump to the other video now, which is, this is mind-blowing because it takes this into the third dimension.
Okay, I gotta go back one, right?
Facebook.
Oh, all right.
And
all right,
it's
right here?
Yep, beautiful.
Okay.
This is by Henry Sugerman.
Yeah, he's a friend of mine. Had him on to one of the shows a while back.
I believe we talked about him on the last show too, bringing up hyperbolic honeycombs. Yeah.
Hilarious, great guy. He's good.
If you want to go ahead and fast forward this, he's showing what a Hilbert curve is there. You can go ahead and fast forward it until it gets into the third dimensional, right about here, almost. Yep. Okay, go back.
Yeah, I've held that thing. It's so nice.
I would love to have one of those printed.
Oh, it was nice. It was in Canada at the show.
And this blows me away because I realize, this entire grid is, you can look at this as you can look at these kinds of tilings like a
pixel or a voxel.
Yeah, it's every single component is a voxel. This is in a, this is like, say,
a membrane,
100 by 100 cube.
Yeah.
You said membrane. I'm seeing the structure of the brain. If you think of the brain as the X at that side and the internal structure of the brain, that's how the brain looks.
Yeah, very similar. It comes down to one point and all branches down.
Right.
Well, from the same concept of filling the space most effectively from a single source to multiple sources
and every fold.
I'm using the wrong word. I don't mean source, but it's repeating, and I don't know. It's amazing. Sorry.
Well, it's like looking at neuron activity in a linear
conjugating.
Every fold inside of the brain they're called Sokal patterns, I believe, and you can build more folds by the more you learn. So it can get more dense. Your brain can get more dense. You get smarter as you get older. Don't believe the stupid people who will tell you different.
The
but it makes perfect sense that those folds would follow along this same geometric pattern. They're just, like you said, they're filling the space in the most effective manner, whatever that's, however we
would do projects like this in actually in my foundations 3D course. So it was called didactic multiplicity. So it was like the initial shape. You take one shape and you make a three-dimensional shape out of that shape, and then you build the shape out of those shapes. So it's the initial shape that's instructing the rest of the shape.
And it's fractal.
The multiplication of that. Yes, it's fractal.
Self-similar.
Right, but because the shape
recurs.
Because it's repeated, the initial shape is repeated. That's the instructive shape. That's the didactic.
Yeah.
That's the way that it goes, and then you multiply that shape.
Say something
and
about
it's dyadic. It's dyadic. Didactic has to do with our hands, and dyadic has to do with two-adic.
No, I'm talking about I've got it pulled up right here on my dictionary definition.
Really?
I wanted to make sure that this is exactly what I was saying.
Wow.
The
That's
textbook
interesting.
of how to is an example of
Stargazer, don't mess
didacticism.
around.
The explicit purpose is to instruct and educate. Books written for children often have a didactic intent, for they are often used to teach children about moral values. So it's this repetition of instruction.
Right,
which is
I forgot.
Is doing. No, it's okay. It's okay. That I didn't. I forgot too. That's why I looked it up.
Yeah, didactics. I complimented See the Pattern about his didactics the other day, his teaching and his philosophy and his way of disseminating information.
So here we have a tetrahedron, and this is through a linear progression in the timeline of the Hilbert curve. And second dimensional, this is taking a look at it second dimensionally, the progression second dimensionally in the third dimension, looking at it as a whole tetrahedron. It blows my mind, because realizing that this concept of the snake moving through different tilings.
Wow.
The snake moves through different tilings. Say the tilings, the pixels actually morph. That kind of grid right there, the line passes through every single tetrahedron in a tetraoctahedral honeycomb. It passes through in the first Hilbert curve we saw, it passes through every cube in a cubic honeycomb, saying that the snake, the fourth dimensional timeline, can pass through or observe instances in the universe, pixels in the universe, in a second. It's a mind breaker. It's to understand that we can see that a fourth dimensional entity could break down and see the third dimension over the same exact lines, contiguous with the fourth dimension can be contiguous with the third dimension if you're using uniform tilings. Same as the third dimension can be contiguous with the second dimension using uniform tilings. And I think this allows interdimensional travel. There's a guy, Code Bullet, he wrote a code for Snake, playing the game Snake. He has an AI playing Snake, and it is following a path like a Hilbert curve, and it has to go along that path over and over and repeat that path. But every so often, it shortens its length and jumps and teleports across, or jumps a pixel instead of staying straight on the path to get the food sooner. But as soon as it can, it goes back onto the path. It kind of states an algorithm for how time can exist. There must be an algorithm,
encompassing algorithm that accounts for all the variables, right? Kind of.
Yeah, all variables in time, or a way to compress the data between memory pockets, information moments,
or whole time spaces. Yes,
Well,
just a frame of time.
That reminds me of.
I'm getting those unified theory feelings.
Just cascading, incompositions of infinite variables. But I mean, I loved your whole conversation. Just saying, it's beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Michael. So, when you were talking, Brighton, I want to touch on a few points here. Just because the math can be produced to show that reality can be constructed in one way, doesn't mean that that's the way that it is or the only way that it could be. And I'm coming at this from a perspective of I can see what you're talking about with it being because in a couple episodes we were talking about the grid of consciousness. Here's the center of the sun. Here's all the planets on the axis of the what's that? The ecliptic of the solar system, and we're moving through the center. We were saying there's a grid. There's a grid, and you're touching on this subject of there being a grid, and the Matrix talks about this, and a lot of people are hypothesizing that we could be inside of some sort of a holographic hollow fractal matrix. Nassim Harriman points towards some of that stuff. You can see that it's very biological, and there's a cascading, and there's a resonance and a memory and a mirroring and a pulling off of the last. So it's not like it's just I want to emphasize this. I'm not attacking your theory or your idea here.
Hyperbolicness.
What's that?
The fluidity and hyperbolicness, perhaps.
Well, yeah. See, I'm not attacking your theory because
of reality.
Because this could be the snake that we're looking at right here. Right. The hyperbola that, according to magnetic hysteresis, these form these magnetic flux densities, and it forms the same shape. They do the same shape with the math of it, and it includes these lenses that are inside here.
I've got an organic example of this. I've just put it in the chat, and it's Romanesco.
Hang on 1 second. I'll get to the Romanesco in a minute, because I haven't touched on the sonoluminescence and the sonobiology of the shells and the structure of the shells coming into existence.
So, buddy, you're seeing the intersection between the two ideas, is what I hear you saying.
Yeah,
you're not rejecting the other idea because you see how it fits.
No, because it's true. Because
it fits into your ideas as well. You're seeing the intersection.
Well, what Brighton's touching on is basically there's a lot of other theories that have predicted similar things. I haven't heard it talked about the way that Brighton talks about it, which helps define it and make it a lot more understandable. But it seems like there's a a plane of time, a metric tensor, the smallest moment that you could possibly measure. That's what it's called, a metric tensor. And these tiny little metric tensors, if you involve the geometry of
the topological geometry.
The topological geometry of what I've been talking about, and these cascading caduceus like shoots that are nested and self-referential. Um, I see that reality is spun off of this web. It's spun like using when you take a camera and you put it into a TV and you spin it, it creates these. These are form constants. They're in the structure of reality. They're in the structure of the auroras. They're the whistlers, and they're also the geometry of what you're talking about, moving hypersonically, cascading through cylinders. So the snake, there's a lot more that goes to like, okay, here, let me take you guys to what a time like slice is, a time slice, because it'll
entropy of a torus is that kind of what he's getting at? I don't know. It's beautiful.
time like slices.
You can think of movie frames. If you look at a whole movie reel, time is the entirety of time is kind of like every single frame stacked on top of one another.
But this is it.
Frame is an actual moment.
This is it right here.
Oh, that's beautiful, and that shows like a helix.
This is what Brighton's been talking about.
Oh, that's beautiful. Hold on.
That's why. See, this is why we come together in this group to come upon these ideas so we can share them. So now Brighton knows how to model whatever he's doing and more effectively towards what we're all talking about and towards the direction of truth that we're seeing here.
Oh, that's incredible.
The collapsing of the universe is.
So this is what this is right here, a time-like slice of a space of space. Time-like slice of space is what it's called. Life is braid in space-time. Okay, well, that's interesting.
Brant just showed one of these toruses on a stick, with the stick being the timeline and the torus being more like the observer, more like the entity, more like the snake. The life form observing time, observing space. It's a great example with the flexahedron. It looks like there's actually 3 flexahedrons on there. Yeah, and they're nested. And that's beautiful. Is that making it almost looks like an icosahedron, but it's not, because it's not strictly a strictly convex deltahedra. Those are not equilateral triangles. Those are those triangles.
Tetrahedrons.
So I want to just nail this. I want to nail this, what I was talking about here real quick, because this will help all of us understand. Here, time like slices of space, and you can do space like slices of also, and that gets into 4 dimensions, like here that shows here.
So, buddy, that's actually why I included this image in here. What the flexahedron models out is it puts form to space and shows how space itself genuflects and dances with form. So the flexahedron, I also shared the link up above, for you guys, just if you want to, print one on your own and play with it.
That's awesome.
It's a JPEG. So it will actually torus and turn itself inside out on the outer and inner perimeter And if you trace the vertices of each one of those, the peaks of the triangles, it will transverse the apex of the interior and then move to the apex of the exterior and then move to the apex of the interior.
Yeah.
And it has its maximum, and you can set the length of what you have your cursor on right now to make it wider or shorter, which will make it more ribbon-like versus fatter and space-filling. I think that's about kind of how consciousness comes into more embodied embodiment, or
The rise of fluidity.
If you take it back to Brandt's image, if you take a look at if there's the Earth in the center of that, the timeline that the helical orbit the Earth takes around the Sun is the stick, and the flexahedron there, which is the white paper structure with the black on it, is the Earth's magnetic field.
Yep.
And so you can see a visual example of that in real life.
That's awesome. It's so where did these flexahedrons come from? Does anybody know?
Topology. It's a study in topology.
It's a study in topology.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, because ultimately what it comes down to, getting into the math of it, I'm gonna run down a list of things that we're gonna get into episodes, but getting down to the math of it, one of them is going to be, one of the stuff that we study is the hollow universe and how you need the stillness fulcrum, and everything is built off of the stillness fulcrum, and how all motion pivots off of it, and you can't have motion without stillness, and you can't have music without stillness. It's the spaces and the intervals between that makes the music.
Would you like to touch on Romanesco?
Absolutely.
Okay, it's in the group chat, and it's above Brant Hinderman's image. Yeah, right there. The very top one in the group chat is the one I'd like to actually start with. Actually, yeah, this post is good. All right. I'll try to explain it here. I brought a Romanesco home, and these are some photos I took of it, and I wanted to study it. It became...
Wow, great photos.
Yeah.
I tried to take some. Yours turned out great.
Yeah. There is this nesting, and it's all phi induced. If you take a rotation, you have 360 circles.
But yeah.
You have 360 degrees in a circle. Now, let's say as this structure grows, as this Romanesco grows, from the very apex, which is the center, it will pivot off and shoot a head off at 137.5 degrees every time. Now, 137.5 out of the rest of the circle is a 1 to 1.618 ratio. That's a 1 to phi ratio. But not only does it have that rotation, again, it has a phi-induced ratio of when it pivots off each head by height, not just by the second dimension of looking at it in width, but also height. Each head comes off at a 1 to 1.618 ratio. And what's absurd and crazy about this is, if you want to go back to the group chat, there's another video, and it's the top one.
Michael, could you just let him talk, please?
Like probably $1 or something.
Michael, I think you're on mute, or you're not muted.
Just, you know.
Buddy, if you want to go to the group chat.
Yeah, just a big little nugget at the bottom, I guess.
Hey, Michael, I don't know if you can hear us. Just mute your mic, please. What are you talking about, Brighton?
Okay, in the group chat, the bottom one. Yes, right there. This is what blew me away about the Romanesco. Not just the phi-induced ratios, but it is space filling.
Alright. Well, I don't suggest that, but can I call you back? Alright, right.
Michael, can you mute your mic, bro?
It is me.
Thank you.
All right. So
Sorry about that, guys.
This Romanesco, if you want to go back to the link.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a space-filling structure. These spirals nest within one another, and as I'm pulling it apart, you can see how these actually create holes and gaps between where it puts off every head. So whenever you can press play. Yeah, and if you want to make this full screen. There we go. You can actually see that those nest inside one another.
Uh-huh. Wow.
And it fills the space. So
oh,
as I'm
man.
pulling it apart, see,
damn.
See how those gears just fit right in with one another?
Yeah, that's so good.
That nub, it's like male and female parts. That nub fits directly inside between the other rotating parts. All the nubs fit inside between the other rotating parts. That is a brilliant plant.
Yeah. Well, you know it doesn't exist naturally in nature, right?
Romanesco? Romanesco is organic.
No, it doesn't exist naturally in nature. It's a hybrid that we pollinated and created. It's a broccoli and cauliflower mix.
Hybrid, yeah, but it still can be organic.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to be just because it's a hybrid. It can still be like an organic hybrid.
Yeah.
But would it have bred without our help? I mean, this is the weird thing. Watermelons wouldn't be the size they are. Neither would lemons. Neither would limes. You know, we help create larger fruits, and bananas. They weren't the size they were, or any wheat or anything, or corn.
Buddy,
yeah.
What you're touching on there is the difference between evolution and intervention. I mean, these are foundational concepts that we're talking about here. Really, am I not?
Well, I'm always interested in them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's where sort of it leads, does it not? This idea that you got the story about the. I'm sorry. What?
Go back. Play it again.
Yeah. No. Click the video right there because it's also based on Romanesco. It's something I made. A top video on up next.
Right here.
And then continue.
Whether or not
it's
the idea of whether or not the intervention in an organic form is a natural part of our progress in the universe, or are we only allowing to be legitimate things that could happen without intelligent design? Dare I say? I hate to use the word, but
what about accidental domestication or like?
Yeah, these two ideas seem to be simultaneously occurring, is my kind of thought.
Well, it's a symbiosis.
Yeah.
It's definitely a symbiosis. And what I was touching on, I think, really generally was the fact that salmon jumps out of the river. It became so excited it wanted to jump out of the river and feed the land. And so it literally does. And the salmon is what makes the forest ripe, and it's all based on the amount of salmon that come in that feeds. Well, depending on the type of forest you have, but for the most part, you know, it's not what you think that makes the ecosystem rich. It's not what you think that makes something what it is. It's the wolves that make the river and create the environment. And these trophic cascades are nested like this with male and female parts, like Brighton's showing. Everything is so tightly wound. Everything is so tightly wound and bound together. We're twisted. We are twisted as fuck. Everything is twisted. That's why you take more drugs and you see more of these, and you start to understand the deeper dimensionality of things.
There's a video in the group chat, and it shows a concept of how Romanesco, or these kind of phi-induced spirals, can be strictly Euclidean, perhaps even Platonic, because it uses cubes and dodecahedrons to show a Euclidean wireframe, a straight line wireframe of what a Romanesco is. It's in the group chat.
But even though you might have a straight line wireframe, it's organic and curved. I mean, I understand some of your fascination with the wireframe, because then you could try to build a computer program off of it or something.
Yeah, and well, I think that our universe is more like a computer program, because you only need the peak and the trough to define a wave, the extremities of the life form. Just like any animal or any life form is explained through their extremities of their features, the extremities of their whatever. Waves are also the same. You cannot define a wave without its peak and its trough. So in that sense, the whole structure, the data of the structure, the mathematical most basic format of all life forms must be Euclidean. You're going to want to click that video right there. Yeah.
You're going to want to click that one right there.
And make it full screen. It's this is just a concept. It's not accurate, or I'm not sure that it's accurate. It's also very similar to some work with Clay Taylor. He has this quasi-crystal. It's titanium manganese alloy or something like that. And it's a dispersion of electrons in a field. And it looks exactly like this. If you want to keep playing it, just let it keep going. Yeah. And so this is a fractal stellation. And those are dodecahedrons. And they just keep stacking and stacking. And it turns into this stellated great stellated dodecahedron. Pardon me. And if you connect the wireframe between the great stellated dodecahedron, it turns into an icosahedron. But this is, as you're seeing, I've done a further stellation of each part, and it looks like a Romanesco, starting to. Here it actually shows the quasi-crystal, which is titanium manganese alloy or something like that, and each one of those would be an electron. And coming up, you can see the dodecahedral nesting, where a pentagon face, there's a spiral. The pentagon holds so many ratios that, it's all phi-induced, phi-embedded. The pentagon. And so as a dodecahedron is made out of 12 pentagons, it was obvious perhaps that, a Romanesco may be using a dodecahedral wireframe and a stacking of which to make its beautiful form. That gives the illusion that it's spiraling.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yes, and this is also a shout out to Alexander Lilikoy, because I had made this, and I believe he jumped off of Facebook before I could show him the collaboration, because that's actually taken from his works. He modeled that first, and I just made the beautiful video about it. So
yeah, thanks for giving credit there, because I knew that was some of his work, and I was going to shout out to him. But actually, he was going to be on this episode. I just talked to him. I don't know if he's got his Skype together or what. I tried to get his Skype together, but that was absolutely magnanimous. If I can say that word and have it mean that, or I can say Sheboygan. Yeah, that was great, dude. Well done.
Great.
And that reminds me of this Anna which we referenced her geometry, and he taught her how to do this.
Oh, it was Alexander Lilliquoy?
Yeah. Well, he claims that he taught her how to do this, but she's off on her own. Us as geometers, all we do is expose. So when someone wants to use something, it's there. You got the math for it. It's right there. So, but this is the first person I've seen do this. Anna here. She was going to be on the show as well, but she speaks Russian. So if we can get a Russian, someone who can be
Tess probably speaks Russian.
Translator.
The word on the streets is that Tess speaks all languages.
Where are you, girl?
Tess.
She's taking a break, or unless I bored her to death. All right.
So you guys are like modern map makers, really. I mean, these are maps, and so what do we do with these maps? That's what's exciting. Here. Oh, hey, Tess.
Do you speak Russian?
No, I don't.
Anybody that does?
I'm sorry.
Raphael,
while we're at it,
actually, Naya, buddy,
hang on.
Naya speaks Russian, and it's someone I've been wanting to invite, so I'll just invite her, and we'll get her on.
Oh, great.
Yep.
I think
Russian.
Oh yeah, totally, she does.
And
okay, well, I can maybe connect Anna with her, and we'll try to do that show. But wait 1 second. Did you just say you speak Spanish?
Yes, I do.
Don't we need a Spanish translator, or was that French? Do you speak French?
It's a French translator we needed.
Yeah, we need a French translator.
Yeah, I speak some French.
All these languages.
Some Italian, and yes.
You're the only one smart enough to do it.
So Tess, could we use your help on a podcast for as a French translator?
She doesn't know. Oh, you said French a little?
Yeah, some French. How is it going to be all technical about this? What does the person do? I could try to do them first and see.
Technical language would probably be easier to translate.
Trunscata Franco or something like that.
Yes, that's his name. Yeah, Franco. What's his
He's French.
Toscano Frank.
Yeah.
So he's French. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's the only language he speaks.
Well,
that
Frank.
sounds like Italian. That's an Italian last name.
He's another geometer, and he owns Geometry by Philosophy, or Philosophy by Geometry. He's another geometer. So basically, what this show
let's ask
is.
him which languages he speaks, and see if he does something else then.
Let's see. I did have a conversation going with him, but I don't want to open it up in front of everybody.
Sure, no.
But I think it was French. I'm pretty sure he said it was French.
Well, that is, I can go to his Facebook and see what else.
But yeah, he's good people. I can connect you guys. I'll try to make the connections happen. So thank you, Tess.
Sure.
Hey, buddy, I have a question for you.
Wait 1 second. You brought up a good point before that came up. What was it?
Yeah, let me know. Oh, with regard to the parallels between what we would call natural selection and or I guess what we would call, in the classical sense, you'd call it the hand of God or the creative idea, and which is more valid, or is one more valid? Do we have to create a hierarchy to say that if there has been intelligent design, that is then somehow a derailing of the natural process, or is only sort of like natural selection through eons of whatever, or even overnight, a natural selection process somehow more valid? And really the idea of the broccoli hybrid being sort of a metaphor for this idea that, is it does it communicate the origins of the universe less because we intervened? Sort of implies the idea that we are a virus living within a natural universe. But I don't know that I buy that. Like, I guess I feel like our contribution to evolution is legitimate. And if other beings contributed to our evolution, that doesn't sort of
diminish.
Doesn't diminish. I resist the hierarchy of those two ideas, one being more legitimate than the other, I guess, in my own nature. But I'm curious to hear what you say about it.
I love that. I love that.
I think a lime had everything in it to be a lime, and it needed to be introduced to a mandarin orange. A lemon needed to be introduced to a mandarin orange to produce whatever it is. It's one of the citrus fruits. Either way, the story is that it's in there. The power of it is in there. I am a certain person, but when I am introduced to a certain woman, any certain type of people that I have chemistry with, I become a totally different person. I become, I am for sure I have my core, but especially if I start a romantic relationship with this person, then I grow into a different dynamic of a person. Because it's a different dynamic. Like the Romanesco grows into its shape out of two other parents. The potential was in both of the parents, but the outcome comes in the meeting of the two. The diversification of it allows the beatitude or the beauties to increase. Like the diversification of people, I say we're getting more beautiful. When you start mixing skins, you get more beautiful looking people. That's what I have to say about that.
It's the co-working of will and way.
Well, can I add something to this too? Because sometimes in nature, I mean, it's not always like humans that alter or create hybrids. I mean, sometimes a bird drops a seed of a red thing next to a yellow thing, and next thing you know, you have a striped thing, and it did it naturally, even though it wasn't really natural. You know what I'm saying? Or something breaks off of something else and lands inside of a tree stump that's rotting, and now suddenly you've got a grafted tree with using the root structure of a totally different species to create this thing. And so now we know how to do that. So we put them in our yards, right? We like weeping cherry trees with the cool bark. Is that any less natural than the thing going on because we chose to do it as opposed to it happening accidentally, even though these things are still living structures that have the process of life? I mean, we've altered them, but they still give life. And to that also, there's many things that we've domesticated that used to be wild that now depend on that symbiotic relationship with us for their own survival. And so we've altered them in a way, but without them, we wouldn't have been able to get ourselves altered to where we are today as well. So how natural or unnatural are those relationships in general? Not just with humans and other animals, but with other animals, other plant species, maybe. I mean, that seems like a natural process that isn't just adopted by humans to create a domesticated symbiosis for survival with another species. It seems pretty universal. My cat Tom is meowing, he agrees. So I feel like these things that we say maybe aren't evolutionary are evolutionary because the state of evolution consciousness that we are at right now allows us to create these natural things that, even though we're not created in an outside environment, are still living and are still natural beings, right? Is that
absolutely? I think of cheetahs that were domesticated by the Egyptians and lived as house pets for X period of time in amongst humans, and now live wild. But they're also believed to be that potentially that they are a hybrid creature. So it's an interesting idea that there's this interplay and interchange and relationship between will and way.
I think that charge is most efficiently distributed on Earth as living organisms. And
I think charge is most efficiently distributed on Earth through wireframes like fascia.
Living things. Like the mycelial networks. through certainly through the fascia.
You don't think copper, or because that's not living? Or would you consider? Should I say that all electrons are alive? That would be a question. Are electrons conscious? Are they alive, or are they not? Because that's might be on a different line of thought, but.
Well, I think
it's important to define consciousness and life pretty specifically.
Yeah.
In order to have that conversation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we believe the sun is alive and the earth is consuming and excreting excrement, what is it breathing? These are questions that could go on forever. If honestly,
I think it's pretty simple, honestly.
But at the end of the day, all of it is charge coming from the sun and turning into what we know as life. And we can see the mirror reflection and the beautiful flowers and the Romanesco broccoli and the trees and the branching of the trees and the spinning and the spiral nature of the charge distribution.
Copper was once minerals. It makes a structure that it builds from dielectric or electric synthesis. I don't know. It seems pretty easy.
Well, if Eugene's right on his deep biome theory and the extremophiles are actually what started the earthquakes, and that's part of what's conscious on all these different levels, then it makes sense that there's consciousness, but it's different chirality than what is not of living biological matter. Biological matter is a certain type of matter that is produced from the sun, that is on a food chain that's connected umbilically to everything else that comes from the sun. It is a cascading type of wrapping around mucus type of insulated, layer by layer, harmonically induced symphony that's sung into existence. And geophony and biophony is geophony is sounds from the earth, and biophony is sounds from the living creatures of earth, from the solar winds, and subsequent auroral octave harmonization within the Van Allen belts is the skin or scaffolding of which builds the cymaglyph for the recursive patterning, allowing for the emergence of form to persist.
That's cool. I like it. Eloquent.
It's sound, and it's all these images that I have on my Facebook that I wanted to show because Heather shared them, and they explain exactly what's going on. If one of these will open, because I have so many windows open.
You might want to close out of some of them to keep your computer running smooth.
Yeah.
Just click the X button.
Well, it opens up the next. Okay. Sometimes it'll start opening up the next one and then start a cascade of closing them all. Okay, I'll close a few. Good point, for sure. Okay, but now I got to open the beast back up. Darn it.
Why not use this tab?
Because my brain doesn't work like yours, as efficient as yours. Okay, what is it? Now I forget what I was looking up. Oh, Facebook. Okay. I wanted to show these images because they've been on pottery. These helical images have been on pottery for eons. Where did I share them to? Our group collectively.
I also posted a few pictures of Kelvin Abraham's work, the topology, and anytime you see an opening, I posted one of his interpretations of how the sun's energy is transferred to the planet and condenses or charges the vectors and geometries to conjugate or condense.
Nice. That compare nicely with what I thought here. The 11-year cycles of the sun, I heard that it gets bound up, and it gets like a big like a big coil, been bound up, and then it has to unwind, and then that's why it's in 11-year cycles. So it gets helically bound. I saw a good video showing it once, explaining it, but here's just some images that are Celtic or whatever origin. Heather might know, but just in general.
These all vary. So he might have some of them labeled and some of them aren't, because these are from the Tartarian Empire of Mudflood, which is a great group if anybody's interested in hanging out with them. But they vary from around the world, so some of them are. But what I found really interesting about them was this relationship to, well, one to each other, but also to the disbursement of charge in a spiral, like as it's being how does that?
That's a cylinder.
Yeah, and how do they, because these are different spirals, but they're all reacting to each other, or all in relation to one another, in one greater piece, you know?
Yeah.
The cylinders within the cylinder.
So once again, we see this mimicry and pottery and ancient just whatever they were making. Here's a good image of a toroid. Let's see if I can make this full screen. I don't know if I can. All right, whatever. So here's some images of exactly what we're talking about. This is identical. This identical field, which is just a cascade of spheres and pressure of spherical charge. When spheres nest, they create they create charge. They create charge between the regions. So this is a Bessel function. This is a birkeland current. This is how the sun pushes its charge off. And it's the same geometry as in the Dougherty set here. And when it comes back to Earth, you can look at it as the exact same geometry coming right back to Earth, and here's Earth. And this geometry comes to Earth, and it comes down. And if I were to put the other lines in, you could see the fields better. But it comes down, and you get these. I can draw in the Van Allen belts because they're out larger. They're not perfect circles, but you get the Van Allen belts, and you get these nested plasmoid centers where there's charge and charge separation. So it's really simple when it's broken down. And that's the same thing as this, the charge coming out of a black hole. It's just moving faster. It's just more focused charge, same geometry. Same geometry as the plane that's spinning around here in the ecliptic. And according to modern science, we've only been around the center of Sagittarius A, which is our center Z-pinch or black hole, 20 times. So that can be depicted with one of the drawings that Brighton showed here of us moving around in a spiral. 20 turns is how many times we've been around the center. If this center is not the sun, but you replace it instead with the center of the galaxy, we've only been around it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That's 13 cycles around it. So that's the whole universe as we know it in our galaxy. Right here, the Milky Way, the whole timeline of the Milky Way. You could do the same thing because it recursively nests, not only just with the sun, but with the center of the Sagittarius A. So you could come up with a helical model for that as well.
Buddy, what's the significance of 19.5 degrees?
Wow. 19.5, isn't that half of, isn't that the rest of the circle of 137.5 to
Well,
make it 360?
It's when a star
No, wait,
tetrahedron
no, that wouldn't be the
is
right math.
when a star tetrahedron is actually placed inside of a sphere like the Earth, two of its opposing apexes touching the north and the south poles. The remaining apex points line up on the planet's surface at 19.5,
and that's
north
where
and
the
south latitude.
Yes, and that's where the majority of sunspots show up, and that's where the majority of storms show up on Earth.
The red spot on Jupiter.
And the red spot on Jupiter.
There's a spot in Hawaii that apparently exists, but beyond that, we see the same points of interest in Teotihuacan, Mexico. The two volcanoes on Venus, the solar system's largest volcano, Olympus Mons. On Mars, the eye and moon of Jupiter, dark clouds, bands on Saturn, dark spots, storms on Neptune's 300-year-old red spot on Jupiter, new cloud bursts on Jupiter. So we're seeing these, basically the theory is that these are vortexes that are potentially, they say that there are these little spirit bodies, or they're little light things that pop up out of these spaces. There's all sorts of stuff that happens at these spots, and they're basically.
Hang on one second.
Yeah.
May I ask who's speaking?
Yeah, this is Mr. Furious. How you doing today?
Doing super good. I'm in the middle of a show. I'm sorry. Phil's trying to get a hold of me too. You guys doing something?
He just sent me your phone number, so he's probably calling you to let you know.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I got to get back to this show. I'm in the middle of it. Can I give you a call in a minute?
Sure, please do.
Okay. Yeah, I'll give you a call in a little bit, unless it's time sensitive.
Well, sort of. I was looking for a service that you might be able to fulfill.
Okay. Yeah, I'll give you a call and like, well, I can do that, and I'll give you a call in a little bit.
Yeah, call me as soon as possible.
All right, cool. We'll do. All right. Sorry, guys. I'm running many different businesses at once.
Hustle, hustle.
So, I mean, that's what you got to do nowadays.
Hey.
I'm sorry, my pager's going off.
Life ain't nothing but bitches and money. Sorry. I'm sorry.
I love you guys.
Sorry. I don't know what came over me. I had to say that.
Ooh. Okay, so we're still recording. I'm gonna edit that whole part out. So I just had to continue finishing it because I was getting blown up, and like they were like, "Serious? Are you serious right now?" I'm like, "What's going on?" Whatever. Okay. So what is this, Heather, and where were we?
Tess put that up.
I assumed that it was you. I'm sorry.
I think this has to do with the comments, right, Tess? This is like you're talking about the representation of the different comet tail types according to these petroglyphs or alphabets. I don't know. I didn't put this up, but I did save the picture and gave it a thumbs up because it's awesome. They're comet tail types, right?
Yes. Yes, they are records, Chinese records taken from the emperors. I can't remember the name. I think it's on the file. Yeah, they're all a morphology of the tails of comets. Look at that. And look how they have the concentric circles also, some of them. And then there was the other photo that I put in there, which looks like the spiral. If you click on the one above that, it shows a cross section of the comet, and it's just totally your spiral. And of course, they can sprout many tails, and this one has 4, and then they can go up, like horns.
And then you see the helical tail.
The
tail spin.
Yeah. I think it depends on how it's. Some comet seems to change just within hours or minutes, depending on how they are discharging either the Van Allen belts of Earth or the birkeland currents of the sun, wherever they are, or another planet. they will look different. They will look so many different ways. It's amazing. The same comet.
The radial view means run, by the way.
From behind. I was from behind.
You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of the father, the person who found Lichtenberg figures. We'll type that in, and I'll show you electrical charge dispersing on a medium produces the same type of effect. And I learned this at work one day by touching when you put painter's plastic up over something and you touch it, electricity, and there's like powder on it, dry powder, like from your drywall mud, it will create this effect. So real life examples of how to do it at home. Images, and there's an interior one and an exterior one. One that moves inward and one that moves outward, and they look just like the feathery kind of things that you were showing here. Comet tails and the comets.
Yeah, that's with the menorah, probably the design and the horns, all the animals that are inspired also, comets and animals, the horns and the different, they even call them like, they said some of the Chinese describe the comet in, I think, 138 BC, like a tree with, it looked like a tree with the branches, and they were describing it just like a tree. And I thought, that's interesting.
Wow, that sounds just like what I was talking about earlier in the show. And look at the figurations. These are plasmoids, and these are fir leaves, conifer. Yeah. This looks like the freaking chart on the beginning of where the pine cone came from. I mean, dude, this gets this.
Well, the Sumerian pine cone too. You know how they have that symbol, the Sumerian, in the tree of life, and then they're holding a pine cone.
Mm-hmm.
Or is a tree of life? I think it has to do also with what you're saying. It's the symbols figures they were seeing, plasmoids from the comets and the planets and the sun and galactic scale, all kinds of scales. Who knows what else they were seeing on Earth? If everything was so highly electrified, the whole environment was completely very different than now. So imagine everything that they were seeing, and their eyesight also. They had different they could see different frequencies that we can now. So, or the range of what they could see is probably different.
Yeah.
Well, Moses was shown with horns, right? And they said when he came down from Mount Horeb or someplace where he was supposed to be, he said that he had like this halo, and he was kind of like horns, like. But the comments also, of course, so who knows?
Yeah, we have that polarity to us.
You mentioned that they could see differently, and they had a different capacity to see at that time. And I just happened to be watching a video of an astronaut recently, and he was up, he didn't go to the moon or anything, he was at the space station, and so he was up there for 95 days. And they learned a lot from his time there, and they've made changes since then, but he experienced, the bone loss and the muscles, and all of his body just basically started morphing, and a huge amount of change happened over that 95-day period. He described it to, if you got a serious sport injury that took you a year to recover from, it took him another year to recover a lot of the damage that had happened to his body. And over that time, the scientists started to realize that this wasn't really damage that was happening to him, and this was really his body responding to the environment and morphing or changing or realigning itself to fit more effectively within the environment. And it happened over a 95-day period with one individual human being. And what they finally realized, that his body was becoming most like the biology, the physiology of a fish or a sea-going creature like a dolphin, and that if people lived in space for long periods, their bodies would likely change and become much more dolphin-like because of just simply the way that you locomote in space without gravity really is much more like swimming than it is walking. And so we would develop strong upper bodies, our bones would hollow out and thin, and we would become much more aquatic-like because space is basically liquid. Our bodies respond to it in that way. And so I thought that was a really interesting twist, that they stopped seeing it as a problem. All you have to do is never come back to Earth, and your body is perfectly aligning itself with its new reality within the period of like less than a year. I don't know, that blew me away, because it's really in alignment with what we see and what we believe in the EU theory, is it not?
I think it's spot on.
Definitely. Yes.
Man, this has been a crazy trip for me myself. I've been preparing for this for exactly 12 hours now. I mean, other than my whole life, for this episode, and then really kind of hammering it out for 12 hours, trying to put different things together to make sense, to really hit it home. And I think we're coming to a close here. It's been plenty of long enough time. I'm going to say a couple of closing words and then leave it open for anybody else for questions or some closing comments. But I'm going to say, I might have said this already, but it's in the last page of my notes here. Communication on all scales is what networks and systems are composed of. The communication on all scales is efficient charge distribution. The language of nature breaks down in these recognizable scales. There's boundary layers between scales on the food chain, just as there's boundary layers on almost every other scale that we can see. So these twisters and your voice and everything else affects everything in people's DNA and how you feel, and just everything. That's why Brant's voice is so wonderful to listen to, because he knows this stuff. and he's calm enough to approach it from a place where he can articulate it. And that comes with a lot of self-care and internal dialogue, or the word I'm looking for is going inside oneself, introspection. And these patterns that we see, these patterns that we hear in the auroras and the wolves, talking to lightning, controlling the mycelial networks and the food distribution and everything on all these scales, whether the wolves know it or not, they could be visualizing on DMT-like trips what their howls are doing while they're communicating, and actually seeing what the lightning is doing, or what the distribution of the herds of different moose and elk are doing as they howl. So that's basically my theory. And we're going to edge closer towards it. We've been bringing it up in every episode. Brighton's moving towards his theory too. I believe that the dynamism of our theories are meeting to coalesce and try to explain and describe consciousness and the hard problem. But next week, we're most likely going to delve into waves, different types of waves, how many, because there's 1,000 different types of waves, and they're all interesting, each one of them. And Russell says the secret of creation lies in the wave, which is why we've been cracking at it since day one. Another good reason, not that's the only reason why, but in the wave lies the secret of creation. We can find it. It's in sound, morphic fields. What is the geometry of morphic resonance? That is like one of the titles of this episode. This is all morphic resonance and morphogenetic fields and biological stacking of creatures, living creatures, creature stacking. So, lose you guys? Fuck.
No.
Not at all. I'm
Good.
still here.
Creature stacking.
Okay, I just can't see the screen. This stupid ad popped up and I got scared. I was like, everybody, are you there?
We've been pinned by Pinterest. We've been pinned.
We're all here. We're here. Everybody's here.
Okay, good. All right. Well, yeah. Then one of the words we learned was neoteric, recent in origin. And Brighton, if you want to say your word to reiterate it for the close for the audience.
I think Brighton took off.
Okay, Brighton's word was we'll have to reiterate it later. So, all right, guys. Any questions, comments, closing remarks?
Hey, buddy. I know there's no way to like. I never want to oversimplify. You know, all the variants that go into these theorems. But do you think we could touch a little bit on Kelvin Abraham's depictions?
Which ones? Oh, Kevin Abraham's? Yes, indeed.
Kelvin? Yeah.
Yep. Calvin, I'd like to get him on the show. I know you were talking in a different chat. I haven't talked to him in person, but.
Yeah, and then there's one that is talking about the topological transfer energy from the sun. But yeah, this is a good depiction too. The interaction at a distance, kind of butterfly effect type stuff.
I've done a geometry, and so has Brighton and Brandt that actually does this same cascading type of effect. But I like how he lays this map out.
Yeah, it's just so eloquent. I mean, I don't want to overuse that word, but it really is.
Yeah, it's definitely simplified.
Yeah.
Here's another one of his.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to have him on so he can explain it to us. Because I know we can look at it and see it for ourselves, but I like to talk to the person and see, the origin of it and other stuff. So,
like I'm saying, I don't want to overstate it too much because it's not my work, but I mean, it is what we're talking about.
Yes, it is. I've drawn the fields myself, and when you draw them nesting, you create the aurora star, and I've already seen it on T-shirts. Motherfuckers, people taking ideas, and that's what ideas are there for. They're there so that we can share them and come to understandings. So, I mean, I walked into Best Buy yesterday expecting to buy a CD. They don't have CDs. They don't have DVDs.
Wow.
It's like we're in a new world, dude. They phased it out. We're already in the digital age. It's all in the cloud.
I should probably get out one too. Damn, I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
I know.
You can't buy blank recordable CDs aren't available.
I was looking for Eminem's new CD, and you can't find anybody's album out. It's like they don't have any of them.
Music, man. Go to Dearborn Music. They'll still sell you albums. They'll still have CDs.
I'm not driving all the way there. I mean, come on.
Come on. Dearborn Music. It's like a day trip. It's fun. It's huge now. They move. It's great. I don't mean to be an ad for them, but if you like a record store, there's not many left, and that one exists.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Okay, I'm supportive. That's why I shop at bookstores. Actually, a lot of my money goes to bookstores.
Great plug.
I could get it from the library. I could get it online, but I'd rather buy it, and I'd rather see my kid buying it and be happy with her purchase from a bookstore. So We got about 2, maybe 5 more minutes. Any more questions? Because I don't want to put too much more time on this without talking to Kelvin.
All right, that's fair. Well then, no, I kind of wanted to touch on, like, just have everyone see the picture where the sun's topologically transferring energy. It's towards the end.
Okay. This one? No.
No.
We got a lot of images on our chat.
I think
Active
it's
group.
further up.
Active group.
Yeah. It's a nice conversation group for sure.
Did it stop recording?
No.
Yeah. No.
No, it says it's still recording.
Oh,
it burped? It must have burped. It burped the 4-hour episode out. It was like, bleh. All right, I'll keep recording.
Yeah. At any rate, it's there somewhere. Right there? Yeah.
This? Yeah. Okay.
His work that I'm sure you've seen.
Ooh. Yeah. I haven't seen this chart, but I've seen other ones.
It's just kinetic electromagnetic energy equals mass divided by or multiplied by volume or velocity, squared, right? So I don't know. I really like the way he eloquently states his math.
Yeah, he's great at it. I love it. It's good stuff. All right. Any other closing remarks, guys? Anyone else? That is really good stuff. And once I understand these maps, I'll probably talk about them a lot more in the group. Cool. Have to spend some time looking at them myself. All right, guys. Thank you for being here. It's been wonderful spending Saturday with my friends. I really love hanging out with you guys.
Thanks for having us, buddy.
Yeah, thank you.
We love this too.
All right. Love is watching. God bless, guys. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Special thanks to Dan Winter. I'd like to thank Don Scott, Eugene Bagachov, Wallace Thornhill, David Johnson, Terrence Howard, Laird Scranton, Rupert Sheldrake. Check us out on our other podcasts, The Electric View and The Bright and Buddy Show. I also independently interview artists at the Universal Ones Artist Collective on Buddy Doherty's YouTube channel. The Geometric View is love is watching product, love is watching production. Thank you for doing that. Special thanks to Jim Wenninger. Executive producers of the Geometric View are Buddy James and Brighton Cotter. Music is by the acronym Beauty, the acronym BUD, and Abyssal Dionysus is the geometer. That's me and Brighton. Thank you for being here. Catch you next Saturday. Love is watching.